Okay, we can start with this with Mark. Desta's taping, so go ahead. We'll start, and once you talk, then I'll do the sort of the introduction.
Okay. So I was talking with Tony in the UK recently, and forgive me if I feel a little nervous. I'm normally absolutely happy to speak. Maybe in this presentation I get a little bit tongue-tied.
Yeah.
But I discussed with him the possibility of going over a text message he and I had been following or sharing with each other over the last 24 hours. And I sort of thought it might be a way to start today's meeting. Again, I don't normally share, but in this case, I thought it might be helpful to kind of put everything off into a certain direction. Having said that, let me just really quickly locate it here so that I'm able to follow along.
And Tony's an experiencer that you and I met in Laughlin, and he's got some pretty dramatic experiences. So just to fill people in who Tony is.
He's sure.
Just
Yeah, I'm
London,
sorry.
England.
I met Tony, and I believe at the same time you did, Grant. I met Tony in it was 2018.
Yeah.
2018 in Laughlin, November. Yeah. And he has extraordinary stories of feathers and orbs and craft and all kinds of stuff that like he's not only just personally witnessed, but he's photographed, and the experiences seem to be continually changing for him. And what's really interesting about it is that it's unlike my case, Tony's allowed to record. Tony's allowed to sort of capture these images, and so as to share with the rest of us who otherwise have not had that opportunity.
Yeah, he's got some pretty wild photographs. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Pretty strange stuff. Having said that, I'll go back to my conversation with him briefly, just so that we can kind of get a sense as to where I'm coming from and why I chose to share today.
Okay.
Tony had mentioned to me, Tony loves all things crazy, wonderful, whatever, and he had turned me on to an episode or a program on Amazon. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's referred to as Good Omens. It's some sort of heaven and hell, take on good versus evil, the plight of us humans having free will and the choice by which to choose left or right or up or down or whatever. And I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't find myself with enough time to do so. So I don't want to be too distracted by it. But for some reason, decided to watch a couple of episodes. And being a member of Prime, it didn't cost me anything. So again, just watched it. Anyway, got through the third episode, and in the end of the episode, it shows the characters, one representing hell and one representing heaven, an angel and a demon, and they are going through the ages, witnessing the various experiences that we've all heard about and read about. And in this case, they're witnessing Jesus's crucifixion. And just so I go back here and I don't lose it, I said to Tony, I said, I just completed episodes 1 through 3. Good Omens, last episode shows them witnessing the crucifixion. And the demon asked the angel, "What's up with this guy? What'd he do?" And the angel replies, "Well, he told everybody to be kind to one another."
Wonderful.
I wrote to Tony, I said, I'd be lying if I didn't admit that this concerns me a little bit. It's not easy to experience unconditional love, and then from that experience try to share whatever that may be. It's a huge challenge for me, as I'm sure it is for many people. And I just wanted to, again, express sort of this overwhelming fear that I have of what does that then mean for my life moving forward. Anyway, Tony and I have been talking for a long time, and he's been amazingly helpful for me to get my ideas out. And what I wanted to share with you is his response and then my corresponding response, and then I will leave it to the group.
Okay.
Tony says, perhaps rather than be concerned of this prospect, we should be appreciative of the fact that we are still here now. Certainly in my case, I have somehow cheated what we think of as death on several occasions already, and so should be happy to have experienced more than may have otherwise been. Similar to you also some years ago, for some reason, you may have taken your own life, except for an intervention of some kind. He goes, I do tend to think that once our purpose, whether it be that one message or deed or interaction with someone or ourselves in some sort of spiritual learning point of view, is that when we are taken back to source, for instance, only recently looking back over my life, I've given CPR to someone who didn't survive, and yet I've also saved lives in physical situations. My own life has also been saved by many other people's actions. Does it need to be as bigger as the things as that, or can it just be the one word that causes someone to reflect on that turns their life around, and maybe someday that's paid forward by them to someone else, so on and so forth? Who knows? He writes, one can be a heavy smoker, eat meat, live to be 100, or experience clean living and get run over by a bus on your daily job. It might be more to do with quality. He writes, I'm in my favorite part of the day right now. Most people are in his world asleep, but he's up. The air feels fresher somehow. The sunlight is about to rise. There's peace and there's quiet with just the birds keeping him company. He then writes, almost half of the sky is dark. The other half is starting to light, and a craft flies over, visible as it crosses from the dark into the light. He goes, I don't even bother to check to see if it's a satellite. It doesn't seem to matter. Now, I'm going to share with you my response. And I think this is the key. This is where I was a bit concerned with sharing today. I wrote him, thanks for the reflections. I've mentioned it to you time and time again from my experience with the woman in the white Mercedes. I've thought about it continually over the years, and it's really confused me. It had really confused me in 1992. I was 21 and just a kid. Ego-minded and upset, about to make the biggest mistake one can make. I'm laying next to my wife, and my beautiful kids are fast asleep. I should feel like the most fortunate person alive, and still, I struggle. I want to make more money or purchase a bigger house. I want to do better with my trading or be known for my ability, as I have given so much to this endeavor. I want another sports car or to travel the world, maybe eat pizza in Rome. Want, me, me, me. Then you come along with these strange pictures and stories of feathers and StarCraft, walking around without your colon, talking about the Illuminati and such. It seems so clear to me when looking at it from your perspective, and still, I struggle. It has truly escaped me and my ego-ridden soul. I pride myself for my conviction and strength of my ability. I love to express my concentration and focus it in areas to separate myself from the herd, and then secretly tell myself stories of conquest and superiority. This whole time, all this crap that's been flying around both in and out of my head, and still I struggle and miss the point. I've taken this all for granted. Even after my intervention, even after falling in love and making life, even after Koso and Shasta, even after meeting you and playing with clouds together. I've got to change this. Really look inward and put this to rest. Get over and on with it. Overcome the turmoil of having to raise my hand and be counted. To admit it happened and that I'm fortunate for everything since. To face this challenge and recognize the importance of the question of who am I today, really? Okay, so.
Beautiful. Thanks. Beautiful words. I know a little bit of backstory on it, and it's a very meaningful story. You and Tony have had your trips that are up and down, which very up and very down. So I appreciate you sharing with that. And just for people to know, I have a book on contact modalities that Dest is helping me put out. Two of the chapters are part of Mark's story. So he's had some very moving experiences, but some very down experiences in his life. And I think his words are very meaningful.
Thanks everybody. I appreciate
Okay.
that. And yeah, just keep on trucking.
Okay. And say hi to Tony. He should be on here, but he's
yeah, he's here. He's here.
He's
and
here?
and
Oh,
Grant,
he's here. Okay, good.
you
Hi,
should be
Tony.
here.
Yeah.
Hoping everybody's aware that Grant's going to be in Big Bear, California,
Okay.
next week.
That's part of the gossip. I'm about to make an announcement here.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No problem. Let me do the intro here. We actually have
Okay.
we actually have, like, Mark is in LA on the West Coast. We have a lot of West Coast people. We have, so good morning to those people. We have a number from the Vancouver, Victoria area, one new one. We also have the people like myself, and on the East Coast, a lot of people joining us. But we have a lot of people from Europe today, and whether they've shown up now or whether they'll be showing up during the meeting, we have from Kosovo, the United Kingdom, France, Spain, Austria, Croatia, Macedonia. So we have people from all around the world, which gives you the idea that this is a worldwide phenomena. And some of the stories, a lot of the European people are new today, and maybe they'll share some of their story. But welcome everybody. I may have to leave as well. I have an electrician coming. So if I do have to leave, somebody bring up a subject. I'm going to give a sort of an intro subject. Mark mentioned one thing that can be discussed about people's travel through this experience, but I'll give you a question at the end that people can sort of talk about, maybe to bring out their experiences. But I may have to leave for a while, so if I leave, somebody keep talking. The gossip, Mark mentioned I'm going to be in Big Bear Lake, and people in the UFO community like gossip, and I'm very open. So here's the gossip. I have been removed from the conference. So I apologize to anybody who bought tickets because I was going to be there. I don't have too many details on it, except that I was notified yesterday I'm not there anymore. So we'll go with that. Is Sinead here? I was going to introduce Sinead Wallahan. Is she here?
Grant.
There you are. Okay.
Yes.
Welcome, Sinead. And I just wanted to introduce you because people are going to see you from time to time. Mm-hmm. We'll talk. We're doing an interview tomorrow, Sinead and I, and we're going to talk about the bizarre synchronicity that led to Sinead coming in. And for people, I just want to point out, because Sinead will be here from time to time and doing interviews. Anybody who gets in a conversation with Sinead, you may want to turn your camera on, because Sinead is a very hard of hearing. She has implants, but she still. It would help if you're gonna have a conversation with her to have the camera on. And in the deaf community, there's a lot of speaking, and I just want to give this little joke that I sort of made with Sinead and that this is actually, I was thinking about it over the last couple of days. It's actually kind of interesting that in the sort of the deaf community, they spell people's names out. I can't do this in the speaking world. When someone says a phone number, I go like, can you repeat it like 5 times and do it slowly? I don't know how they do this. So my sort of word for Sinead is like this, and it means that it's, I make this joke, she's from the spirit world. And so I call her Sinead Spirit World Oprah, because she has had this sort of idea she wanted to do interviews. And I'm really, although I do a lot of interviews, I'm very not comfortable in them unless I have somebody with me. So she provided a resource for me. And it was interesting when I started thinking about this, that Sinead actually does like live in the spirit world. And I reference this to Sinead. If you follow Dr. Michael Newton's research, and that's like between him and his students is 35,000 regressions of people they take into the spirit world. And one of the things that people recognize as you're going into the spirit world after you die is that it's completely silent. And so Sinead has her implants, and when she turns them off, she is in complete silence. And so I say she lives in the spirit world, which is kind of interesting, because I'm actually going to be I'm starting to work on this book, research on this book, where if you look at Jacques Vallée, over the years, Jacques Vallée has said, I'd be very surprised if this turns out to be ET. And I sort of got on the same sort of impression, where I sort of looked at it and said, I don't know. The more evidence you look at, the more it looks like this may not be ET. And so I'm working on this thing, but it came down to this thing about the spirit world, is that in the spirit world, people are reported not to be, it's completely silent, so people really can't talk. So if you've ever heard a channeling session, or say a direct voice phenomena session, where spirits are talking, you'll always hear them start with, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Because in the spirit world, there is no sound. It's basically, you'll get vibration, but you really don't have any sound. And that may be why you hear all these reports of aliens having no ears and having no sex organs. And the idea we have, that we sort of bring up in the UFO community, is, well, the reason they don't have sex organs and they don't have ears and they talk telepathically is because at one point we're going to stop, 18-year-old boys are going to stop having sex, and young 18-year-old girls are going to start talking to each other in coffee shops. And that's like crazy stuff, that we're going to stop talking for 1,000,000 years and then suddenly lose our ability to speak, or 18-year-old boys won't want to have sex. So that was a concept that I had, is that coming out of the spirit world, if you're manifesting from some sort of etheric plane, you're going to be missing all these body parts. So I just wanted to introduce Sinead, because I think it's very important to realize that if you look at the spirit world, and I do this in the contact modalities and in this other book that I'm going to be doing, is that there's a lot of crossovers when you look at the UFO phenomena, and then you start looking at phenomena like physical manifestations or physical mediumship or this kind of stuff. You see all these crossovers. It's basically it's all the same thing. So thanks, Sinead. And if you are watching on my YouTube channel, with the White House UFO YouTube channel, you'll see Sinead joining me in interviews, and we will do an interview tomorrow where we'll get into this bizarre synchronicity that happened when I decided to ask her to help me, and she decided independently that's what she might want to do. Now I'll leave it to the question that I wanted to put up, that I had sort of given to Sinead, and she may want to give her impression. But basically, Sinead and a number of people that are on this channel that are watching in today are people who have just been woken up. So what happens is, you have all these bizarre experiences all your life. You really don't know how it all fits together. And then at some point during your life, they suddenly wake you up, and you suddenly realize, like, oh, that's what's going on. Like, oh, I'm a UFO experiencer. And so my question, to open it up, and we'll open it up to people to answer this question, or if they want to share an experience, is you've suddenly been woken up and you realize that you are part of something much bigger than yourself, and that you may have a mission in life. What are the first 3 questions that you have that you want answered?
You're asking anyone right now, Grant?
Anybody that wants to jump in, yeah. So maybe Sinead, you can, because people haven't heard you speak, and Sinead is very good. You will not realize that she has a problem hearing, but she's very, I called her a very good actor. But what do you say, Sinead? Because that was the question I asked you, is because you only woke up last June, right? You had this sort of awakening experience, and suddenly everything came together for you. And so what did you think? Like, what do you need answered?
Well, first of all, hi, everyone. And Grant, thanks so much for inviting me to be here. And I'm just really happy to be here. I feel a little bit nervous, actually, which is not like me. I've done public speaking before, and I'm never nervous. But this whole area of knowledge and understanding means so much to me. So I think that's why I'm feeling a little nervous. So in very brief summary, because there's quite a lot to say about what I've been experiencing, but just in the interest of time and being considerate of other people who want to share. The very brief summary would be that and I'm responding to your question too, Grant. I've had, for literally my whole life, I've had all kinds of experiences of suddenly just knowing things, just understanding things, psychic experiences, very powerful physical, experiences that kind of came through my mind or something, or through my energy body, and then just arrived in my physical body and created a kind of electronic or electrical experience. So all kinds of stuff. And
your ayahuasca experience, you should mention your ayahuasca experience as well.
Okay, I
major
will
ayahuasca
mention that. Yeah. So essentially, as many of us have experienced in our lives, I grew up in a family where no one recognized what was going on with me. I didn't have anybody who I felt really saw me, or at least this part of me, which is the biggest part of me and always has been, this part that's connected to, I don't know what to call it, the everything, the one. And so it was an experience that was quite lonely. But what it caused me to do, that has been a huge benefit, and this is also where my deafness also comes in, is that I had to go inside. And so going inside is probably the most valuable thing I've ever done. I did become, closed off to others in some ways because of it, which is something I continue to work on. But it really made me go inside the universe of myself. And when you discover the universe of yourself, you discover that you are the universe and the universe is you. And so that really started to plant seeds in myself that I did not always pay attention to. I often ignored them. I often didn't know what to do with them. I found the whole thing very overwhelming and hard to process, hard to understand. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I didn't understand that my spirit guides were there always with me, and they were always saying, hi, we're here, hello, they were giving me messages, but I didn't get it. And so one thing I'm incredibly grateful for is the fact that they have always been there for me. They've never given up on me. They've never let me go. And so in the past, I just come out of a very, very difficult time of life for a long period. And what's really remarkable about what's happened recently, sorry, my cat is eating my computer cord. Just 1 second. Okay, there we go. Oh, darn, sorry.
Okay. The cats, a lot of people have the cats.
I think he wants to be part of the conversation.
There you go.
Anyway, so I've always been somebody who's really worked really, really hard on myself. I've always had this feeling that, there's some reason why I'm here. Like we're not supposed to just blindly walk through life bumping into things and then die. Like there's a reason why I'm here. There's something going on, and I don't know what it is. I've always had that feeling. And so I just tried to make sense of that feeling by working really hard on myself, therapy, journaling, creative writing, whatever, and constantly thinking, what is the meaning of me, of life? Why are we here? So then 2.5 years ago, I went to Peru, and that was a spiritual journey, very deliberately. So what Grant is referring to is that, first of all, I don't know if anybody else has this, I have a pattern of threes appearing in my life to a huge degree. And this happened again in Peru, and that's partly why I knew that what was happening was really significant. So I went to Peru to do a spiritual tour of the Valley of the Incas. I didn't want to do the usual touristy stuff. And then the other half of my trip was an ayahuasca retreat in the Amazon jungle. So I get to Peru, and I arrive in Cusco, which is incredibly high altitude, and I had crazy altitude sickness for 3 days, first 3. On the evening of the 3rd day, I had an unbelievable vision. I mean, I told Grant about this. I was sitting on the rooftop of the hotel I was staying at, and looking out over the bowl of Cusco. Cusco is kind of in a bowl in a valley. And across the other side was the Andes Mountains. And so I was just sitting there thinking, wow, this is so amazing. I'm so happy I'm here. And I'm looking at the Andes Mountains, which are sprinkled with these little tiny white lights of, you know, people's homes and roadways and businesses and so on. And then clear as day, the face of a jaguar appeared in the Andes Mountains across from me, like looking at me, this massive, massive face of a jaguar just staring at me. And I have cats, clearly. I'm kind of I've got a cat connection. I've got an animal connection in general. But anyway, I just couldn't believe it. And I was blinking and rubbing my eyes and looking away, then looking back, and sure that I was somehow creating this in my head, that maybe I wanted to see a vision. No, it was really, really there. And that was the third night. So that's the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened is that when I was on my tour of the Sacred Valley of the Incas, I took a plant spirit, which is you drink the plant and it's ceremonial. There's a shaman there. That was really something else. I don't even know how to describe that. It was an incredibly beautiful experience. I saw amazing detail of ancient Peru in the sky. I saw these two gigantic winged beings, the first of three. The third one I saw in the Amazon jungle. And so I realized that there are really spirits in the land. I mean, I've always kind of known that, but it's the first time I've actually seen them. So I saw this giant spirit in the sky, and I saw a giant spirit on a mountain, and I saw all kinds of other things, including some ET motifs, which I didn't think much of at the time, believe it or not. And then that was over. But when I was in that state of being on another plane while also knowing that I was on the earth plane, I felt amazing. I felt really, really myself, like really solidly with myself. And that was the first time I felt that way. And I honestly don't know how long. And so I was very aware of the fact that this is my home. This state is me. This is where I need to be all the time. That feeling has not left me at all since that time. It wasn't just because I was on this plant spirit psychedelic experience. So anyway, so the tour ended, and then I went to the Amazon jungle, and I also got some crazy feedback from the people that I'd been on the spiritual tour with about how I had been emanating this certain kind of vibration. So just the whole experience told me a lot about what was happening with me inside me. And then I went to the Amazon jungle, and I took the ayahuasca, and we were supposed to take it for 4 nights in a row. And the entire retreat was a week long. It was 7 days. I was put totally accidentally into hut number 3. And then we are getting to know each other as people from all over the world, and the shaman is going to take us and guide us through the first night of the ayahuasca experience. And so the first night, nothing happened. In fact, I fell asleep. I was lying on the floor in the ceremonial hut. I'm just like, I'm here, come and talk to me. I'm here, I'm ready. No, nothing happened. And then the second night, again, nothing happened, although I stayed awake because I got a talking to from the shaman the day before about falling asleep. So I stayed awake, nothing happened. Third night, again, a 3, boom. It was just like, wow. I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to try not to go into too much detail, but the first thing that happened was flashes, flash, 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 which actually happened 3 times. Flash, 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 flash. It was like when you're driving and another car is coming towards you and they're trying to tell you your high beams are on or something, and they flash at you. It was like that. So I felt like, oh, pay attention. It really was the message of, okay, pay attention, pay attention. So I thought, okay, so I was paying attention. And then after that, I saw the shaman's voice as a visual manifestation of his voice, and it was coming from the spot on the floor where he was sitting and spiraling endlessly in this beautiful spiral of very bright purple light. Interesting, because that's the top chakra there. Up, 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 up into the sky, just as far as it could possibly go into the universe. And then I was suddenly, I knew I was still inside the ceremonial hut, but I also wasn't. I was sitting in the universe, is what it felt like. I was sitting on blackness, and just blackness. There was nothing else around me except that lines were coming out from my body, from underneath my body, just going out forever and ever and ever in every direction. And lines were also crossing those lines. And so it was like I was sitting on a grid, and every time a line crossed another line, there was a dot of bright neon light. And then I became aware of that. And then all of a sudden I was inside a UFO. And I know that because all the people around me who were in my group in the ceremonial hut, who I've been able to see, we're doing the ceremony at night. You're supposed to do it at night because then there's less visual and auditory stimulation. But I had been able to see them. I've been able to see the shaman. You know, there were a couple of candles in the middle of the ceremonial hut. There was, the walls of the hut are about 2/3 of the way are made of wood. And then the remaining third that attaches to the ceiling is just netting. And so you can see outside into the jungle. You can see the night sky. You can see the silhouettes of the trees. I couldn't see anything anymore. I knew I was still in there physically. My physical body was in there, but I was in a UFO. And so all the way around me was this beautiful line of purple light, glowing purple light that was in a circle all the way around me, around where the netting should have been. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm in a UFO. And I couldn't see anything, but I knew that's where I was. But also, Grant, I don't think I told you this, underneath me was, I still literally, I'm getting goosebumps right now, still thinking about it. This happens every time I talk about it. I felt this enormous, powerful engine turn on underneath me. It was like, boom, 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 like this powerful vibrating engine underneath me. And so it turned on while I was sitting there. And then suddenly I was outside of the UFO. And in front of me was sort of, I couldn't really see it very clearly, but sort of the entrance to the UFO. And in front of the entrance was a line of beings, but they didn't have bodies. They were light. They were made of light. They were made of multicolored light. And so they were flowers, and they were fireworks, and they were squiggles and twirls, and they were lines, and they were moving a lot. And the feeling was unbelievable enthusiasm, just like, we're so glad to meet you, like, you're finally here. And oh, this is so great. Like, just this incredible wave of enthusiasm that was actually quite overwhelming. And so they were talking to me in my mind, and telepathically, obviously, and they were saying, we're so glad to meet you. Like, there was just a lot of joy and enthusiasm and welcome and happiness and just this wonderful energy coming from them. And they were repeating the same phrases, we're so happy to meet you. We're so glad you're here. And then that became, okay, all right, let's go. We're going. Like, you're coming and we're going up. We're going to take you and we're going to show you things. So let's go right now. Come on, we're going. Like, let's go. So this very strong, come on, we're leaving, we're taking you, and we're going now. And what was happening at the same time was that I was so overwhelmed. And so I was talking to them and saying, this is so great. I'm so happy to see you too. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for being here. But can you just like tone it down a bit? Because this is my first time. And I haven't done this before, and I'm just, whoa, can you just bring it down a notch? Well, they didn't do that, or maybe they did, but it didn't feel like that to me in my physical body. So I was just sort of trying to, I was breathing deeply, and I was kind of rubbing my thighs. I was sitting on my legs, and just sort of, okay, Sinead, just stay with this. You have to be able to let it happen. Ayahuasca is a very intense overall sensory experience too, so I was dealing with that. And then I really wanted to go with them, but essentially what happened was I became very distracted by my physical body, because ayahuasca is hard on your physical body, and it's a cleansing. So you cleanse either by vomiting or having diarrhea. And my stomach was going crazy, and like really going crazy. And so I felt very distracted by that. And so I felt sort of pulled between the dimension or plane or whatever that I was on with them, communicating with them, but also my earth body being distracting me and keeping me like stuck to the ground there. And also they were saying to me, you have to be clean before you can come with us. You have to clean your body. Your body has to be clean. Your body has to be pure or purified or something like that. I can't remember the exact phrase that they used, before you can come with us. And so that meant that I couldn't walk. Like there's no way I could stand up. So I knew that meant I would just have to let go. And so then this ego stuff of I cannot shit myself in front of everyone came into my mind. Like that's really what happened. And I just felt like I can't, like how, I don't know if I can do that. And then I'd be sitting here in it while my mind is going somewhere else. Like I just didn't know how that was going to work. And I felt that, you know, that ego stuff about being embarrassed. And so I just said, I'm really, really sorry. I just can't. I can't right now. And then I just really couldn't handle too much more of the stimulation. And so I said to the shaman that I needed help, and he came over and fed me this lemon and salt mixture that kind of brings you down. And people helped me to the bathroom. And then I was in the bathroom for something like 3 hours, having this whole other experience in the bathroom that was incredibly meaningful. That was on a whole other level and tied together other themes in my life I was working on. And then I came back to the Mallorca, to the ceremonial hut, and I felt them leaving. And they were talking to me again, and their voices were much further away. They were obviously up in the sky. They were leaving. And I said, no, wait, don't go. And they said, very calmly, very reassuringly, they said, don't worry, this is your invitation. And so I felt like, okay. And then I went back to the hut and I laid down, and I thought maybe some more visualization would happen, but it was pretty much over. My body was, I was coming back down. So I made my way back to my hut, and I was so jazzed from the whole experience, I couldn't sleep. And at this point, it was quite late at night, and we had started the ceremony at 7 p.m. This is hours later. And so I'm tossing and turning, and I just can't sleep. And so I decided to just let myself be awake. And so I must have tried to sleep for at least a couple of hours. Anyway, at that point, it's getting very light outside. And so I turned over and I looked out the netting of my little hut number 3. And there in the tree, sitting outside my hut, was the third huge winged being, just sitting there casually in the tree with its feet up on the branch in front of it, these gigantic wings coming down behind it, just sitting there beside me. And it was amazing. And it was like with the jaguar face, I rubbed my eyes. I thought I must be hallucinating. I've just done ayahuasca. I have lack of sleep. This can't really be there. You know, this part of your mind that doubts yourself comes in. And so I kept rubbing my eyes and blinking, but it just sat there and stayed with me until I fell asleep. And the next day I felt like I've never felt in my life. And then I came back to Toronto a few days later. That's where I'm based. I'm in Toronto, Canada. And ayahuasca was still with me, because if I can keep speaking, should I stop, Grant, or what? Should I stop now?
Yeah, maybe here.
Okay.
I'll just make a comment. If next time you go, you talk to Mark before you go. He's probably a world expert on fasting, and you wouldn't have a lot of the problems, because I was with him in Mount Shasta, and this guy can outfast or anybody, and so wonderful story.
Mm-hmm.
And
very
meaningful. That's this tie-in. What's that?
I realized I didn't answer your question. Is that okay if I answer that really quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So what you woke up. So what are the questions that you think that people should be looking at? What was your question?
Well, for me, what I was going to say was that there were a few things that happened after the ayahuasca trip that led me to have this giant breakthrough in June, where they basically shoved me towards all of this. Like I didn't have a choice. They just shoved me, and they said, you've got to look at this now, and you cannot ignore this in your life anymore. So my experience wasn't really questions. It was more of, like now everything made sense. It was more of making connections and understanding. I just knew that it was them. I just knew. And I knew that then they had always been with me, and I didn't really care what they looked like, what kind of beings they were. I still don't really care. I feel like it's just, the point is having that connection with them and receiving their guidance and following it. And they're unbelievably communicative and responsive with me. So I don't know if this means anything in response to your question, but I didn't really have questions. I felt more, it was more of a confirmation of this feeling of knowing that I'd always had and didn't know what to do with, and denied and thought was ridiculous. And I thought, oh, I'm stuck up. I have this feeling of knowing, but it's just this deep, deep part that all of us have in ourselves, that we know we're connected to everything. And so it was just incredibly confirming. And that's what it really was so powerful for me, was I'm not crazy. This is real. This really is me. This is really happening. And that was incredibly precious. So that's my response.
Beautiful. Yeah, to me, it comes that you're sort of describing what I had, a different type of experience, my noetic experiences, where I always tell people the hardest part of the experience is trying to convince people that it came with absolute certainty. It's like, oh, I know. It's not an idea. It's like, oh yeah, that's what it is. I know it now. So
Yeah.
anybody else want to jump in and go
Tiffany
off?
does. Tiffany does.
Tiffany, okay, Tiffany Mack.
Hi, how are you?
Good. You've had a lot of experiences. We've talked in the past over many years.
Well, it's sort of, I guess we're going to talk about maybe the initiation of when we sort of had this wow moment of, oh my God, there's something more than what they claim is here. So I've done a few years of radio, but I got into this because I was having so many experiences of my own. You know, you all have spoken a little bit about having some very crazy near-death experiences, or experiences that were more elevated by ayahuasca or something that sort of gives you initiation and pushes your experiences to the next level. But so there were a few times where I had near-death experiences, and I think that some of those moments may have actually been connected. My first that I remember was I was drugged, and I was at a restaurant, and didn't make it home. Ended up in the hospital. You know, they pronounced me dead in the ambulance, and I had an out-of-body experience where I saw everything from above and saw what was going on, and it really puts you in a position where you're like, oh God, there's got to be something else, you know, whether it's just the soul, because you're not completely stationed in this physical form of human. So that was my first experience. The second experience was when I lived in Greece. I ended up getting this strange virus that only 12 people on the island had, and I was the only one that survived it. So during that time, I had some experiences that were really bizarre. One of them was that at night, I was in this private hospital, and they only spoke Greek. And at this point, I was still learning Greek and struggling with the language and the culture. And being in a hospital, I lost 15 pounds in a matter of days. This virus was just unidentifiable. They had no idea what it was. They wouldn't let me off the island. I was not allowed out of the hospital because it was extremely contagious, and they just couldn't figure it out. Well, it pretty much got to the point where they called my mom in the States and said, you need to figure out how you're going to get your daughter's body back. So during this time, I was in the hospital for 9 days. At night, I had the strangest experiences. There were multiple nights where I was taken down into what looked like a basement, and these very bizarre instruments were used on me, and I was terrified. They were sticking hoses down my throat, and I couldn't move. I was immobile and terrified, petrified, and like there were lots of different weird lights. And you don't expect to be taken from your bed in the middle of the night in a hospital when you can't hardly move. There's no reason for it, and sorry, I'm having a little bit of an allergic reaction to something. I'm not sure. Anyway, so this is one of those first times that I was really terrified because I had no control. And when I got out, I ended up having to go back to the States and have surgery. But what was scary is I don't know who they were, what they were doing. And years later, looking back at those incidents, I feel like, yes, I was being looked over and guarded in a way, but also I felt like they may have been, like the hospital situation, I might have been abducted during those few nights and really hadn't connected it until years later. So about 5 years ago, I started having these crazy experiences, and they started to become really intense. So I would see like little beings at the bottom of my bed, or a little girl waking up and I'm finding a little girl at the end of my bed and thinking that it's my daughter and trying to tell her to go lay down, and flipping the light on because she says, I'm not Maddie, mommy. I'm like, Maddie, lay down. She's like, I'm not Maddie, mommy. And I'm like, what the heck? So I turned the light on and she's gone. And my daughter is dead asleep next to me under the covers, hadn't moved. And then, whatever it was, something about 5 years ago really did wake me up. And from that point, I've had, like last year was almost a complete year of nightly visitations. I've had a lot of experiences that were fairly neutral. Some of them were pleasant. A lot of them were negative. And I don't know why there's such a variable group of visitations, I don't know why there's so many different entities. I don't know if something happened with those 2 times where I had these near-death experiences that opened my mind and got me to a point where I'm sort of in between. This waking world I never have a problem during the day, but at night I have these conscious experiences where I'm talking to my fiance, telling him exactly what's in the room, who's in the room, what's going on, what are they doing, trying to communicate with them. And a lot of times it's just so bizarre. It's like, am I hallucinating every night? How can that be? You start thinking, you question your sanity. And I really don't know if there's a good answer as to what's really going on. But I've had multiple people come to my house, and I've always said there's like a portal. There's a portal here. There's a portal here. And there's a few people that I have in a CE5 group that are really good friends. And they've spent the night multiple times. And one of them, Hillary Sullivan, who is a sweetheart, and I know a few of you know her, but she's come over and she's had 2 or 3 experiences in my house, and she's had visitors coming in, and I all I can say is, sleep here at your own risk, because you never know what's going to happen, and you never know who's going to come and say hi, or pull on the blankets, or come and sit on your bed, or I don't know. It's been crazy. So the most recent, this past year, has been spent with my new fiance, Brent Sibley, who's a UPS pilot. He's been flying for around 30 years. And he just recently had a UFO experience, and while he was flying, and called it in. And of course, I've got a video of this guy, and he's like, it's stationary and it's huge. It's massive. What is this? Do you see any air traffic? And they're like, nope, UPS flight, blah, blah, blah. There's no traffic. And he and his co-pilot, they're like, well, there's something here, and it's big, and it's not going anywhere. It's right where it is, and it's not moving. But so there's been a lot more experiences while I've been with this man than ever in my life. And I don't know if it's because he's so trusting and he really does believe what's going on, because he's witnessed these things with me. He does not see the beings, but he has had physical reactions to the experiences, including when there's been like laser beams and things like that in the room from these more negative entities. He's awakened an hour later after he's been asleep to burning sensations in his on his face, or feeling like he's having a heart attack. And I'm sorry, I apologize for the dog.
Okay.
So there's also been let me let him out real quick. There's also been some experiences where sorry, stomach.
He wants to tell about his experience.
So yeah, so I know. So anyways, we've had a few experiences that were very terrifying, and I don't know if it has to do with my my job over in Greece. I worked for the Department of Defense on a NATO base and a U.S. naval base. But I spent most nights on this base alone. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, and I was the only one there. I literally was in a building by myself, and I would be there, randomly. I had different schedules, but anyways, I would have missing time, and I ended up bringing my dog to base with me because I was just so scared different times. But anyway, so one of these experiences, I just don't know if there's a connection between me working for the DOD and then having all of these crazy experiences. One of them that keeps happening is there's this entity that comes through a type of portal, and there's like a robotic arm that comes down and auto focuses on my face and starts moving around. And then there's always this one person. It's a man, and he's very big, very good, big guy. And he starts out looking like a man, and then he changes his face. His face changes, and it's almost like it goes from a human face to a almost reptilian face. And this is one of the ones that terrify me so badly, because I feel like it's an entity that is trying to test my fear level and to see if he can push me to another level. But these situations with those specific group of entities, the robotic arm with the telescopic, the focusing camera, and this military type man whose face changes into like a reptilian. I don't know if they're connected to my past, if it started there, or if something else has changed in my world over the past 2 years. But he seems to be trying to get me, trying to get my dogs. And I've told him over and over again, every time I see him, which has been, I don't know, 2-3 dozen times, I'm like, don't touch my dogs. You're not allowed to be here. You don't touch my children. You can't be around. You need to leave. And my fiance, Brent, almost every time he's like, stop talking to him like that. Make him get the hell out. He's like, and I'm like, I don't know what this guy's capable of. So I'm going to be a little bit more respectful than that. I'm like, sir, you need to leave. He's like, stop calling him sir. And it's like, I don't know what this guy's capable of. Obviously he could walk through walls, what else can be capable of? So, I'm going to lead off with having a little bit more respect than that. And, anyways, each time that this guy comes, there's something bad that happens afterwards. Like the next day, like, my dogs have pooped blood for 3 days straight, or I've pooped blood for 3 days straight, or Brent's had feelings like he's having a heart attack for 2 days. There's always something big and something bad afterwards. So now, but there have been also some really good experiences with what I would consider to be my ET children, my hybrid children. One of them was a very beautiful, tall, slender, no hair, no real, somewhat human form, but not like us. You know, there's still something different, more of an energetic being, emanating like a pink light. And I do remember seeing her and noticing that she was peeking from door to door. And I said, you know, I'm scared. I can tell you're a little hesitant. If you want to touch me, I'm not going to move. And I would lean my hand out, and she touched me. And it was so much like a blessing. I mean, it was so sweet and sensitive. And I just cried because it was just, I knew she was mine. And so there's a lot of good, and there's some bad too. And I, even with the bad, I feel like there's either a test or something that's going along with it. And I don't have all the answers. So it's somewhat confusing, but, you know, it's each time I'm like, huh, that was interesting. And each time I have another experience, I'm like, huh, that was a good one, or that was not so good, but I'm here. I'm going to go about my day and do what needs to be done. And if it happens again, I'll be ready, a little bit more ready than I was yesterday, you know? So that's it.
2 questions for you. Are you,
Mhm.
I assume you're journaling all this material?
Oh, hell no. Are you kidding me? My
No?
ex-husband tried to take me for everything for having a few notes. I'm not going to do that again.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
Nope.
And the
If
other
I
question
can't
is, have
remember
you,
it, it's gone. So don't worry about it.
the other question is, have you done any regression work to try to open up what's actually going on?
You know, I did once because of my CE5 group. There's a girl, Rebecca, who does past life regressions, and she does, some gentle hypnosis and things like that. And of course, she wanted to do it. MUFON actually sent me to her, and that's how we made this connection. But MUFON was extremely interested, and I sort of felt a bit used by their process. Even though I did appreciate what she did, I didn't really get a whole lot of information because most of my experiences have been conscious. You know, I'm not asleep. I'm lying in bed or awakened into one of these situations. I really do have a lot of memory from them. It's not like I'm trying to search for something in the past that I don't remember now. I mean, I'm sure there are times like that, but most of my experiences have been conscious, awake.
Well, thanks for sharing with the group, because I've heard some of your stuff from Greece. I heard that before,
Mm-hmm.
so I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate your sharing that. And let's see if somebody else has got something to maybe add something to it, or
Grant,
support. And
Paul wanted to
Thank
jump
you.
in here.
okay, Paul, go ahead.
Hi, Grant. This is in response to your question. So thank you very much for your story of Greece and all your experiences. And it's a wild and incredible story. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That
You're welcome.
we got some pickups on some things that have happened to us too that are not anywhere near in the same intensity, but definitely there. So what I wanted to speak to is Grant, your question about awakening, or the sense of really awakening. And Mika and I were in a head-on collision in 2012, January 2012, and we were just driving along in Bodega Bay, California, getting ready to go home. It was 5:30 in the evening, and it was in January, so it was just dark. And a car comes over the top of the hill, and in our lane, and I swerve, it swerves, and it hits us head on, and the loudest bang I'd ever heard in my life. And I knew when that car turned, it was a much bigger vehicle, I knew we were dead. It's like, okay, we're dead. And there was a certainty about being dead. And then everything went really silent for a few seconds. And then I'm awake again, very much awake. And Mika and I are sitting there, and we're faced into a bank, a dirt bank. And we're talking to each other. I'm saying, are you okay? Are you okay? And she's saying the same thing to me. And we're saying, well, I think so. Well, we weren't. We were all busted up and everything, but I didn't feel any pain or anything at this point. So we said, well, we're not dead, so we must not be done. And that was the awakening piece, where it was like, okay, we don't know what's next, but what's going on? And then we said, and I wonder what's next. That was the event. And of course, immediately an EMT was 2 or 3 cars around somewhere, just got off work, came rushing up and saved our lives, saved Nika's life, because she was not breathing at that point. Anyway, so we had this experience, and from that point on, I didn't feel any pain. I had 2 broken legs, broken sternum, broken hand, all bloody and everything, but I felt no pain and was actually in an incredibly good mood. Now, it may have been the adrenaline kick in or the endorphins that kicked in, I'm not sure. But for the entire period of time, for the next 3 months, no pain. And so it's it was like, that got my attention. It's like, okay, what's going on here? And what are we supposed to do with this? So that's where we've gone. So that was in 2012. And since then, Mika and I have come out with our story. We're talking about our ET experiences. And, but it was very much an awakening moment, Grant.
And a lot of synchronicities happened from the point of collision, because the solution showed up immediately with the problem at the same time. Constant synchronicities, problem solution, problem solution. We don't even have to worry or think about the problem, because the solution was already presenting itself, and we stayed in that state for a long time.
So that was like a guardian angel or whatever. Guardian angels were right there with us and just kind of led us through the whole thing. So that was what I wanted to share.
Yeah, I can add to that. I mean, you've heard already today a couple of people talking about, very, near-death experiences, on the verge of suicide, your trauma car event. Desta and I are putting out a book called Contact Modalities, in which I go and I say, the more you look at it and you start looking at people who are psychic or mediums or UFO experiences, they all have this story, this bizarre story. And even the Free Foundation, when they did their survey of 3,200 experiencers who claimed that they were interacting with whatever the phenomena is, 37% said they'd had a near-death experience. Mm-hmm. And so you come to this thing is, why is this happening? And I know the Free Foundation wanted to do a survey, and one of the noetic experiences I got was it said to me, is it one life? If it's one life, then it's one world, and it's got certain rules and regulations. But if it's multiple lives, everything changes. All the rules change. And it was this idea when Free was looking at it, they said, how is this possible at 37? That's like 8, almost 8 times the national average of people who've had like near-death experiences or a real bad trauma experience. And so they said, well, how is it possible you could be an experiencer, which is considered a random event, and to have a near-death experience was another random event? How is this possible? And I said, because the assumption is wrong. You're assuming that it's one life. If it's multiple lives, then maybe you chose to have this. But there does seem to be this thing that everybody seems to be describing today, is this trauma event. That trauma seems to open it up. I'll talk to people about being psychic or whatever. When did this start? They'll say, oh, I had a near-death experience in 1992. It was this thing. It's like the trauma, it's almost like I've got this idea, it shuts down the sort of the left brain, your ego brain, and you suddenly pick up the signal. And so you have these events, whether it's ayahuasca, which shuts down the left brain, or whether it's a near-death experience. It's like suddenly you cut out the noise and you suddenly pick up the signal. Whereas before you're just listening to the noise. So when people are describing, they may mention, I mean, you have these bizarre synchronicities of the number of people on here today who probably have had near-death experiences, or the other one we always look at is RH negative blood. Like, and then you find out people go, I don't know. And then they go check and they go, yeah, I got it too. And it was it's kind of a bizarre thing where people have this RH negative blood. So thank you, Paul, for that. I appreciate it. And you have had encounters with beings. So you had a healing as well, correct?
Right. I had a couple show up at my dental office and cure me of a terminal, or not terminal, but a brain tumor or something. Yeah. And other experiences too. And
was that after the event, or was that after the car crash?
It was before the car crash.
Okay.
But one of the things that happened there, Grant, that it felt like, or after we talked about it, I thought we were in a different place on the road than what the accident report said.
Okay.
And so we may very well have been knocked into a different reality or a different parallel life or something. I don't know, but it was very, very strange. Sense.
It's almost like, Sinead was talking about that, where she's in 2 different places at the same time. She's with these beings around the ship, and yet she's on the ground. She can feel her physical body no, I'm not there. I'm in 2 places at the same time. So thank you.
You bet. Fascinating.
I have a question. How many people on here are RH negative? Is there a way to
raise hands or state it?
I am.
Okay, that's Grant.
Yeah.
Is anyone else?
I
I
am.
am. This is Doug. I'm RH negative.
This
Okay.
is Paul, RH negative.
Okay.
I'm
This is
not, but I have a
Tony.
weird kill
Yeah,
factor.
I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not, but Bob is.
Okay. I think Jan is RH negative as well. Aren't you Jan?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
What
Got
is RH negative? I'm not familiar with that. A lot of this stuff is still new to me. So what is RH negative?
Well, RH negative is it's a factor, a blood factor, and it's pretty specific. But what it does is it claims that you do not have the rhesus factor in your blood. I don't think it actually means that you don't have monkey blood, but the rhesus is a monkey. But a lot of the people are having this sort of ancient bloodline from sort of the Basque region, and so you typically can trace your relatives back to the Basque region of like southern France and Spain and a little bit of Italy and all that little area. But also there's been some issues with RH negatives being more psychic and having more abduction situations.
So
Now, one thing that I know for sure is that as a RH negative woman, I had to have a ROGAM shot in order to not in order to not abort my baby. So once a woman has RH negative blood, they have to be sure that the spouse or the partner doesn't have a positive blood type, because the woman with the RH negative blood, their body sees the baby as being foreign because of that other factor, the positive RH factor.
So then if you are RH negative, you'd have that would be your blood type instead of O positive or O negative or something?
The negative aspect of that, it's still A, B, and O. So there's still that across the board, but it would be negative or that.
Tiffany. This is Doug.
Okay. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, the other aspect that I know of about a blood type is that O negative can donate to everybody. We can donate blood to every blood type, but A and AB and all the other combinations cannot. So
Correct.
for some reason, we're a general I call it the knuckle dragger blood. We're like the old world caveman blood. We can be given to everybody for some medical reason.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When
to hide out in a cave.
Yeah.
yeah. When I used to donate blood, when I go to the Canadian Red Cross, they'd all go, "Oh, great! You've got the negative blood. You know you can donate," because they use it for babies, and they have to take, I think in Winnipeg, 2 a day or something, and it's given to babies. And then they tell me the story. I say, "Yeah, I know the whole story about, and they're so happy when you come in. It's like, oh, can you book your next appointment right away? Because they want to make sure that you're lined up with this blood because it's so rare, and it is universal blood."
It's 4% of the year's population, if that tells you anything.
Yeah. So,
but it's sometimes called alien blood because there's always this connection.
It's always interesting because when you do find people that have these crazy experiences and you ask them, "Oh my gosh, what's your blood type?" They're usually like, "Oh, mine's RH negative." And you're like, connection, because you know that there's not that many people on earth that have it. And it seems to be very prevalent in our community.
Yeah. And the near-death experience is the other one where you can ask people, like I'll ask them all the time, "Have you had a near-death experience?" And it's like, "Oh yeah," or they've had a trauma or a head injury or, something like that, where it's almost like the trauma opens up the valve or whatever. And like with Sinead, you have this thing with the ayahuasca, with people will talk about the high dose psilocybin or the ayahuasca, where it's sort of like, oh, suddenly the light comes on and it's like their life is completely altered and it's changed and they go down a completely different road.
Yeah,
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
If I could just jump in here,
Dave.
the RH factor. They found that there's a tribe in Israel, just right outside of, I guess, Jerusalem, that the whole tribe is Rh negative, and they have Rh negative people in Europe. And I think those are also in a certain area. And I guess it's migrated itself here to the US. But I think that's where it kind of started from. And then I had a question for Sinead. She answered most of my question. But also with Brittany, I guess whenever you have these types of, I guess, phenomena that happen to you. I know one thing that happened to me. I was abducted, and the electricity was so intense, and I had my dead sister's voice come through that same portal. Now, could aliens actually, when they open up a portal, could they bring in other, I guess, past loved ones or their voices or whatever? They mask this. I don't know if you the two or three that went through all this, if you could separate the two. If there's a portal that opens it, that things will come in through that portal. And I found that the ETs opened a portal for me one time.
Well, I'll respond to that right now if you
Sure.
like. I can't say that I know enough at this point to be able to answer that question. I think Grant is much more the person to answer that. But what I can tell you is that, first of all, as a couple of people have mentioned in chat, I just want to emphasize it's not necessary to take ayahuasca in order to communicate with your spirit guides or the ETs or whoever you feel is around you. They've always been with me. And I think for me, in terms of there being a portal when it comes to ayahuasca, my experience was that part of the reason that they were so happy to see me was that they had been waiting for me for a long time. That's how I felt. And I know that's a very common experience with experiencers. So for me, I feel like I was so blocked up and so deeply unhappy and disconnected from who I really am and from my abilities and from my connection to them that, when I arrived in Peru, I immediately started feeling very, very different. I felt incredibly connected to the land, and it had an immediate, extraordinary, grounding, connecting experience in me that was really deep, profound, holistic. So I felt that during my whole trip from beginning to end, whether or not I was on ayahuasca or the other plant spirit that I took. I do think that the ayahuasca was, for me anyway, a necessary tool, because I think that they needed me to take it in order to reach me. I think they had been trying for a long time and they just couldn't. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't get it. And so this time they were like, they grabbed the opportunity. So I think that's why it was a very, very helpful tool for me in that way. Having said that, ever since then, ever since Peru, ever since I made a promise to myself a year afterwards that I was not ever going to put myself last in my own life ever again, which I've always done, there's been sort of a process of me making actions and decisions and choices for myself that have increasingly opened me up and has made me more receptive. And so now, for the first time in, I don't know, maybe 30 years, I'm back to myself again. And so I have this ongoing communication with them. I talk to them all the time. They talk to me all the time. If I need something from them, which is usually love or reassurance or guidance, they respond literally immediately. It's really, really uncanny. And so I think the ayahuasca was a tool, was something I needed to push through the last bit of resistance that I had in my emotional life and my mental life to be able to communicate with them. But I think there are many tools. I think meditation is one. I think love, the practice of love, of gratitude is one. I think there's many things that we can do to get to that point of connection.
Dave, I can add to yours because my whole life has been an obsession with death. I actually did it when I was in university many years ago. I did a major paper where I went to hospitals and looked at all the weird things that happen around death with paranormal stuff. There's a couple of things. If you look at some of the experiences, I don't know what the exact number is, but it's pretty high. How many people who are on board the ship who see a dead loved one? There was a woman who was, I'm still trying to track, because she was on the same radio show as me, but she talked about the fact that when she was on there, her dead husband was on there, and she was furious. Like, what are you doing? And they don't describe, it's not like a ghost, like it is her dead husband. It was like flesh and blood. He was right there. And she said, what are you doing this to me? That's not my husband. My husband's dead. He's got a birthmark on his back. Lift his shirt. And they lifted his shirt, and there was the birthmark. And she was very unhappy. The other one is a guy by the name of Brett Oldham, wrote a book, which I recommend, called Children of the Greys, who talks about his children. And he said when he was on, they brought his dead dog on there. And he was he was dealing with the Greys. He was not a big friend of the Greys, but he said his dog was on there. He was furious, like, why are you bringing my dead dog on here? But it was the dog. It was not a ghostly image. It was actually the dog. And the other key one, as I say, when I'm working on this book, Is It E.T.? There's this big connection between the spirit world, stuff that happens with dead people, and this. And Whitley Strieber, if you know the story of Whitley Strieber, he wrote the book Communion. And when he was writing that book, this is pre-internet. You had the cover. He had been told, his wife had channeled, he was going to call it Body Pain, because it was a very, very painful experience. And suddenly his wife starts channeling in the middle of the night, Anne, and she says, we will not call it Body Pain. We shall call it Communion, because that's what it is. And I had gotten the impression, and I haven't been able to confirm it, that he was actually told to put this alien face on the cover. But a lot of people you'll talk to say when they saw that photograph on the cover, they knew, oh, I've been abducted. It was like a wake up thing in 1987. But anyway, so when he did this, even if you go to Amazon and look up Communion, the book, and look at the comments in Amazon, you'll see all these people who were saying, that book changed my life. It woke me up. It was almost like this near-death experience or whatever, that, car crash or something woke them up. A lot of people say the book Communion was what woke them up. And so Annie had hired a secretary, because they got at least 200,000 letters. Some of the rumors are it's up to 1 million letters they got from people all around the world. And these letters will be found in Rice University. His files are going to Rice University. But Whitley Strieber tells a story. At one point, halfway through, his wife and an assistant going through all these letters, she came out and said to Whitley, whatever it is we're dealing with, it has something to do with death. I'm absolutely certain of it, because everybody was talking about this in this sort of thing. So there is this very direct connection, and that's where I'm going to look at this hypothesis that maybe it's really not alien. There's a lot of people who have said that all along, is because you see the experience changing between say 1895, where the beings are hanging off ropes in these ships with propellers, wooden ships and stuff, and they say we're from Mars, and they got these weird clothes on. And then you have the 1950s. It was Mars, Venus, the moon, and now it's Alpha Centauri and Zeta Reticuli and all this sort of stuff. And one of the theories is that they just basically, it's the same thing as spirits, or say fairies a couple hundred years ago, that they are playing off our minds. And Desta and I had a contact with a very famous Hollywood person, very prominent Hollywood person, and that's what he had said, that the beings, when they come, the intelligence, whatever it is, it plays off what your belief system is. So if you are fearful, they will use fear to teach you a lesson. If you are very loving, they'll use love to teach you. They really can't do anything else. All they can use is what's in your head and screen image themselves to teach you stuff. So death is my opinion. I've done a lot of study on death. There is a very direct connection between the phenomena of death and this UFO experience, whatever it is.
Grant, may I say something?
Yeah. Go ahead, Doug.
Well, of course, you and I have the mutual friend of Chris, and both of us have spent a good amount of time with Chris Bledsoe at his home and in conversation between the three of us in any number of ways. And what I'm still fascinated about, hearing what everybody has to say, and I don't think that I have anywhere near the same kind of intensity or experiences that most people that I'm hearing from have. But one thing Chris did stress was this moment of desperation. As you know, he was in terrible desperation, and he was calling out to his guides, his angels, his God, his whatever he's trying to reach out, calling out to for help. And that help came along. And that help was the thing, the catalyst that changed everything. But when I think about a Chris situation, and then I look at Travis, and then I look at Calvin Parker, and I go down the list. There still isn't, to me, any particular. I think this is one of the fascinating things about the whole thing, is there's no particular pattern of a person. I have yet to be able to find a continual pattern of either an enlightened person that starts to get these messages, or a person practicing any particular kind of meditation and now starts to get them. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm saying there's no particular pattern, because, you know, if you look at the Travis story, it happened to him. If you look at the Calvin Parker, who's down at the water with his friend, it happened to him. Grant, what about you with Charlie Red Star? You guys were poking around hearing this story, and it kind of happened to you. Yeah. So I don't know. I think one of our biggest problems is that we get caught up into, you know, when we have the discussion of oneness, that we tend to think of oneness as in values of good or bad. Well, we want all good things to be a oneness, but we don't want to include the horrible negative evil that at least we call evil. So in other words, we call things good, we call things bad. How do you know what's good? How do you know what's bad? A terrible thing happens to you, turns out in 6 months to be the best thing that ever happened to you. And a great thing happens to you where you're so excited, and it turns out to be the worst thing that happened to you. So when we talk about oneness, we do have to include, as hard as things are, or as a great and exciting and kumbaya moment as it is with a number of us, there are some horrible things that happen to people that are hard to explain. And that all has to be part of the oneness. If that's not included in the oneness, there is no oneness. So it all has to somehow be looked at, that we name things, good and bad. We give things titles and names and so, and that it takes a lot deeper a look. That's just something I wanted to express.
Yeah, I can make a comment on that. That's where when I had the noetic experience, it was this idea, is it one life or is it multiple lives? If it's multiple lives, then it changes from good and bad to experience. And that's where this trauma thing comes, that if you're in a car accident, you go flying through the front shield of the front window of your car, that might be the thing that is the best experience of your life, that it wakes you up. So we look at it as experience, is we take personal responsibility for whatever is happening to us. And if you assume, even if it's wrong, that maybe I chose this, what am I going to learn from it? Because it's all basically experience. So can I ask you a question? Because we had this thing, and I just want to ask one little brief question, because we were talking about animals, and the Sinead was talking about the animal, and you are friends with one of the top intelligence people, and his daughter. You and I both have been very interested in portals, which has been discussed here as well today. And Kashmir Pandolfi, who talks about the fact that when you get through the other side of the portal, that things turn into animals, correct? Maybe you can clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've actually sat in the car with Kashmir when she's told me the story of Cheetah Land, which is just fascinating to hear, because it just doesn't come across as some sort of standard child story that's just out of nowhere, where she makes things up and likes to imagine things. It's got too much roots and references to it and so on, but it somehow it connects back to Egypt and cheetahs and another existence that she remembers being in, and that, you know, I won't go over, you know me, Grant, I won't go too far into Kashmir because in respect to Ron and Princess.
Yeah. I'm just making the point that she brought this up, and it was a 6-year-old kid talking about portals, which how many 6-year-old girls talk about portals, and this sort of idea that there's this animal connection, because you'll hear people talk about this animal connection all the time, whether it's Chris Bledsoe with the owls, or he has the hummingbirds, or, you know, there's always this sort of animal connection, that they are part of this, whatever this play is, or whatever we're experiencing.
And you know, Ron had mentioned at one moment, because somebody was writing about something on your site, and you know how Ron will chime in every now and then on your site. Ron wrote either publicly or to me or something. He said, "Looks like somebody tripped across the Egypt cat connection." And you know that Ron doesn't say too many things too often for no reason. I mean, if Ron
and when he says something, you pay attention, because he never says anything.
No, he never says anything, and you're like, "Oh my God, I got like a huge clue. I better like
He's
follow
giving
up
us a
on this or
clue.
something." But you know, and he's left enough trail of comments for, and Grant, you and I go over this all the time, for it to be nothing. He has no point to even be participating. I mean,
Yeah.
he wouldn't even take an interest. And he's already made public comments that you have caught, whether it was on the boat when they were
Yeah.
taking cruises, about finally science has found a way to move people from one spot to another, blah, 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 blah. I mean, he's described portals.
Yeah.
And I've gotten an indication as to some sort of reality, but I think what we had to do is we had to subtract the Dan Smith equation from Ron and Princess, which was one of the factors in the you know, the three legs of the stool all the time that needed to be removed, because I think Dan did a lot of bad for Ron and Princess and misrepresenting him and crossing it over into a whole bunch of stuff that made it so ridiculous that people didn't believe anything anymore. So that's all kind of calmed down. Where it goes animal-wise, but I know there's a very, very deep connection to Kashmir and cheetahs and some land where I mean, she remembers being there before she was born. She remembers, she actually has even made mention of that's how her parents met. She was witness to her parents' meeting. So she's a very fascinating child, and we'll just have to see what else comes from her as time goes on.
Yeah, she's a pretty fascinating little kid. I mean, she's pretty smart, and she's done on stage, and she's done a documentary stuff. I mean, this is a pretty sharp little kid.
Yeah, and she's, you know, she knows how to fly drones. She knows how to put them together. She's traveled all over the world, and she continues to travel all over the world. She takes everything on, and her parents are just incredibly dedicated parents to anything that Kashmir is involved in. They go in hook, line, and sinker, because I know Princess and I often talk about me giving her some art lessons and this and that and everything else, giving Princess some art lessons one-on-one. And if she can never find the time, it's very, very difficult because she's taking care of a child all day, whether it's in school, picking her up from school, and so on. So they're definitely a fascinating couple to watch how things unravel.
And they have the Kashmir Foundation, which is basically protection of animals in the world.
Yeah, well, it's drone programs and protections of animals, and they use drones throughout the country and the world in various places to spot poachers and to do a number of things. I don't know the full extent of Kashmir World Foundation. It may branch off into things I'm not even aware of, but it's pretty fascinating stuff, and you know, we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Doug.
Could I change the subject?
Sure, go ahead.
So my experience is a little bit different. Born a psychic and a healer. I remember being in a crib in diapers. My mother and my grandmother would bring people to me and tell me to hug them and heal them. And I remember my mom and my grandma training me as a psychic how to be like that, because they were psychic, and my dad's family were psychic, and they're Sami from up in the Arctic Circle, so they have their traditions, and their tradition is that one of their first leaders was a star person, and that's where we get our gifts from. So I've always had these abilities, but I did have a near-death experience as a child at 6 years old, where I was instructed of what I'd be doing as an adult, and it seemed like hours. And I said, well, how am I going to remember all these things? And the voice that was there said that I would know when the time came what to do. So those are my experiences.
You're mentioning, we call them Aboriginals in Canada or Indians in the United States. What is the connection there? Because there seems to be, Sinead and I are actually interviewing a guy out of Colorado tomorrow. There seems to be this connection between the Aboriginals and whether it's psychic phenomena or UFOs. I think it's all the same thing. All these paranormal phenomena are all just aspects of the same thing. But
can I speak to that if Mitzi doesn't want to respond? Can I speak to that? Mitzi, do you want to say something?
I just know that for my people, we intermarried with the Star people, and they gave us gifts through those intermarriages. So we've just been doing it from generation to generation. And both sides of my family, we were told not to tell people because we all know several generations ago they used to burn people like us as witches. So we just kept, our gifts to ourselves. But to me, it was natural because I just knew it on both sides of families. The indigenous people of the Arctic Circle are called, my tribe, I'm a clans leader. We're called the reindeer people in Finland. That's pretty close to where our family was. I guess I'm not sure what questioning you're asking, so.
Yeah, Sinead, you want to say something?
Yeah, first of all, Mitzi, that's so amazing. And what a lineage you have. That's really something. I was just going to say that I feel like the Aboriginal connection has a lot to do. I'm not Aboriginal. I'm pretty positive that in a recent past life I was. That's the only past life that I'm quite sure I've had. Anyway, but I'm not in this life Aboriginal, so I don't have that knowledge or understanding with me. But I do have a very strong connection to land and animals, very, very strong. And I feel like that is why our Aboriginal people, our First Nations people all over the world are so valuable, because they listen to the earth. They listen to the spirits. They listen to the animals. They listen to nature. They're not so ego-driven that they believe in this philosophy of dominating animals, that, animals are stupid and have no intelligence and are there to be used for us. And, the earth it doesn't have consciousness and is not alive itself, and we can just dominate her and use her if we want to. The Aboriginal people have taught us such a... What was that?
Oh, that's Desta.
Oh, okay. No, that's okay. The Aboriginal people had just a true understanding of the symbiosis between human beings and the spirit world and nature and the animals and the plants, and the fact that everything has a consciousness. And so their minds were just so much more open. I feel their spirits were more open because they had this deep understanding, this inherent understanding of the interconnectedness of life. And so that automatically made them more open to being able to receive this knowledge.
Miss Mitzi, if I can ask you something, I found your story fascinating. Grant and some of you on this meeting know about the fact that I've been working on a show for a long time, a musical on this very topic. And Mitzi, I just wanted to let you know that I have written into my show a character named Sage, who is a Native American Indian. And I'm no expert in the world of Native American Indian lore. I know about it, just like I do something to the degree of the Inuit and the this and that and everything else by coming across it over years. But I'm in no means any kind of expert, but I have written a character who carries this quality that you're talking about. She carries this quality of connected to the earth, connected to the star people, connected to a bigger continuum than we're able to connect to today in our fast world, where we have only sound bites of information and short moments of time for attention span. And the reason why I bring this up is it may be, if you're interested, it may be fascinating for you and I to have a discussion at some point, if you'd be willing to maybe help me shape this character in my show that brings this knowledge to people within the context of my writing.
I'd be honored to, but I can only say I know about my own people, the Sami people. So although I am friends with a lot of people who are on reserves and reservations in the North Americas, I can only, tell you what I know from my culture or from my elders or from the elders that I listen to here.
Oh, sure. Well, that would be fantastic. Whatever it is, you would know that much more than I know to begin with. It's not something that has to be steeped in exact history or exact fact. It's going to it's going to contribute to the show in the direction that I'm trying to take it, with an element from a native tribe, be it the type of tribe you come from, or a Lakota Indian tribe, or a this or that. I'll try to sort that out. But if you would like, I'll leave maybe my email for you on the private message. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question to
Sure.
everyone?
Sure.
How many of you have had experiences with, say, specific romantic partners in extraterrestrial form?
Are you talking about the connection where the beings are putting people together?
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't, but I know what you're talking about. I mean, I think Suzanne Chancellor was one of the biggest stories, people like that. And yeah, I think there is something to that. I've heard enough stories. I know what you're talking about. So maybe anybody have one of those stories to tell us?
I only know that my family come from the star people, so we are the aliens.
Yeah.
But do you feel like there is a continuous hybridization program going on? I feel like I've had specific partners throughout my adult life, and I seem to continuously go back to them, and we have a certain place where we go. I guess I'm just more fearful for my daughters, sort of the future of that phenomenon. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old daughter. And I'm getting ready to have another daughter who's 11, and we were just looking back at her, some little papers that they had done in school, and she literally had, at the age of 4 or 5 years old, just all of these images and these little sayings at the bottom. I might be able to find it, but stuff about, this is me when I went up into the clouds. This is me with the alien friend. This is me with so-and-so the alien. And I mean, she was little bitty, and this is what they were doing in school. She was telling them and drawing pictures and doing this or that. But I'm wondering if we've sort of seen a plateau of this hybridization program, or if it's just getting started to where more of our children are going to be raised in an environment where it's talked about openly, like it is for my family. I just didn't know if anybody else is experiencing this.
I ran into a hybrid young lady, an Asian, back in 2010. I believe I talked about this story with Grant. And we spent the evening together. She come up to me, and I asked her who she was and what she was doing. And she says, we were supposed to meet. And I didn't know who she was. She said, we're supposed to meet. I said, why are we supposed to meet? But she didn't say anything. She had really dark eyes, very piercing, and had a really strong, I guess, aura about her. But she also, next day I spent some time with her, but it was 6 months later that she come back to my house with 2 other younger friends. So that told me that there was a big connection there. My cousin was with me. So we saw those 2 young guys, and they seemed to dumb us down, or use a magnetic, I guess, energy to dumb you down and just keep you to the point it was like, don't grab a camera, don't grab a bat, just be calm, and everything's fine. And that's what you feel when you're around them. But if it wasn't for just that Sedona meeting that I had with her and the weird questions and things that she did, but when she come to my house 6 months later and turned her face down the road, and the 2 young guys come up to the door, and my cousin was really freaked out. Afterwards, when they left, he turned white. He had to run home. But yeah, I believe the hybrid program's going on. But also, if you take a look at the young kids nowadays, the geniuses, the piano players, the people, the young 4 and 5-year-old that can graduate from college, it's amazing. I think that program's already been going for some time, and they're just advancing our civilization like they did thousands of years ago. That's my thoughts.
Hey,
I would just, go ahead.
I'm sorry, real quick, Grant. Tiffany, I met a woman once. I was out on a date, one date, only once, that scared the daylights out of me. I've never to this day been able to explain it. I met her at a restaurant.
Was it me?
No, not at all. No, you would have been a pleasant surprise.
No,
Not really. I'm usually, yeah.
Absolutely, I cannot explain it. I sat across from her and just, I was in a cold sweat. I had never reacted that way before with anybody in my life. I was in a terribly cold sweat, petrified, did not know what to say, had to excuse myself from the table several times, go downstairs, wash my face, look in the mirror, go, Doug, what is going on with you? What is the matter? What is so frightening? And I had to compose myself as best I can, go upstairs, finish that dinner, and get out of that restaurant faster than I could ever get. It was so awkward. It was one of the most awkward things I've ever been at. And to this day, it has no explanation for me. I cannot explain what it was, but I just felt this was a foreign entity. This was not a person the way I would greet a person. And they almost studied me. They almost just looked at me and studied me. And it was quite frightening. It kind of damaged my dating life for quite a while.
Go figure. Yeah, I find that really interesting. I've never really felt like I've had a daytime meeting like that. Mine have always been just in this other place. I don't know where it is, but it's like you sort of wake up to this situation, that you wake up to that reality and go about your business with this one man or these two men or this set of women and this man or whatever the situation may be, but they always tend to be the same people for me. And I feel like we have just a really deep sensual and physical connection that, you know, just seems lacking in my real world. Not that I'm not in a happy relationship, but it feels like there's somebody out there that is connected to me on a different level. So
I can make quick comments. Nancy Tremaine, who was on last time we had a session, has a experience where she talks about this lifelong relationship with what she calls Mr. That's the one thing I always would like to bring up, the thing about we have this thing about, you know, are we being colonized, or, you know, getting ready for us to destroy the world, that we're going to be replaced, or they're seeding another planet, this whole hybrid thing. But I think it ties into other stuff as well, because you look at it, is this a random event, or did we choose to be a part of this event? And you go into this synchronicity thing where it's the same sort of puzzle. It's like this one you'll hear where Sinead and I had this just absolutely bizarre synchronicity thing that linked up with, I think it was last Sunday it happened. And so you go like with the synchronicity, we're looking at each other and going, is that even possible that happened? It was just like, and that's the whole thing, is it's what is outside our control? Are we controlling it? Are we we got higher self who are sort of sticking stuff in there to test us and to lead us on a certain path? It's this whole sort of thing where we're either out of control and it's a random world where we're a victim, or we're part of this whole process. And when you get to the synchronicities, you got to start saying, like, you know, I look back on my life and I used to think it was all random, and I start looking at the events that happened. I'm going, no, that didn't happen by accident. That didn't happen. And you start getting this bizarre thing, like, how much of the world, I guess my question is, how much of the world do we actually control where we think it's happening by accident?
Grant, there's three people that have been waiting to talk here. I just want to jump in whenever.
Okay, so let's put the first one on.
So Kat has been waiting for a while, and Walter wants to jump in on the hybrid program, and Jan and Miles maybe at some point wants to jump in too. But Kat's been waiting for a while.
Okay, Kat, go.
Okay, I try to jump in when the iron's hot. But anyway, for anybody that doesn't know, I work with Costa Macraeus. So Sinead and I know each other through that, and I met Grant through there. Thank you for the book. I have felt since I was very little that, yes, we were seated on the planet, but we're all here spiritually in what I call a meat suit, and my cousin hates that term, but we're having a physical experience. So I think your ETs and your ghosts and all of those things are just part of the same. We're all the same. And maybe that's that expression of we're all one. It's just whatever frequency we choose to take that gives us that shape. But to answer one of Sinead's questions about just knowing things, that's claircognizance. And I had taken bunches of classes on that as a kid, which is probably pretty unusual. And I'm one of those people who felt I wasn't born into this world of a regular family. My parents were not my own. So when you're talking about Ron Pandolfi's daughter, I wonder if she's one of those star children or indigos, the crystal children that come in to accomplish something at a specific time. Like right now, the world seems to be changing and opening, and some of us came here to facilitate that. And that's what I feel my job is as a healer and an intuit. And I also had that funky experience where you're taken on the ship and you're told the answer to everything, but you're not allowed to remember until the time is right. So I think this is the time.
Yeah, 40% of all experiencers say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And I say to the skeptics, you'd be insane not to at least try to talk to these people. And that's not something you're going to make up. Beautiful. Walter wanted to talk too, and Walter's got a kind of an interesting background. I just want to ask him a question. I don't want you to elaborate, but you've had some interactions with the American government. Are they working on this kind of stuff, or are they not?
Constantly. Yeah, it's a real focus for them, and I think you said it really well, Grant, that they're just kind of lost in it. They're in a lot of ways like a lot of us, who are trying to figure out what's going on. They may have a few better ideas here and there, but all in all, it's still a very strange and unsolved set of mysteries for them. And they're constantly, somebody mentioned, I believe earlier, the McUltra programs and the like, and all of that was just trying to get to these ideas of what is consciousness, how does it work for extraterrestrial beings, how does it tie in telepathy. They have not many more answers than we do, and in a lot of ways that's probably a good thing.
But they do understand the consciousness connection. Like you and I are sort of interacting on physical mediumship, and I didn't realize that. You said that they had interest in that as well. So it's like almost anything, and this is my impression, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that whatever it is, whether it's water, snow, physical mediumship, UFOs, there's an aspect of the U.S. government that's looking at, can we militarize this?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly the case, and their focus is ultimately militarization of it. Now, it depends on who you talk about. When you say the American government, you're talking about 19 intelligence agencies with, subdomains of each of them, and somebody mentioned, I believe, the DoD, Tiffany Mack, and so each of them have got a piece of this. A lot of it overlaps. The agendas overlap, but they have figured out, Grant, probably about the same time I think you got your downloads, that this is a consciousness thing. They have to understand it from consciousness up rather than from nuts and bolts down, from materialism and idealism down. They've figured that much out, but I'm not certain that I've had any hint. And I'm not the greatest conduit for these people, but I have enough interaction that I don't get the sense that they have solved this mystery, or as I said, 7 mysteries before. Physical mediumship is how I got into it, because I was requested to allow some of their active people to be involved in physical mediumship, and it was not something I really wanted to be involved in. And I said, well, look, I'll go to a seance and come back and tell you what's going on, kind of thing. And that was one of now 30 or 40, I suppose, that I've been in. And we always have a discussion afterwards, and they're looking at all kinds of things that they're hoping to pick up little hints of little pieces of things. They're really disconnected in a way. I mean, they're so materialistic based, they're so military based, they're so control based, that rather than sitting back and letting this stuff absorb and learn, they try to grab an idea and throw it into a bucket and do something with it. And it just isn't working out for them. But they also have some very, very bright people, like the Putoffs and the Greens of the world, that are saying to them, hold the horses there. We've got a bigger thing to take the challenge to, and there are better ways of going about this than trying to throw everything into a gun and shoot it. So they're learning slowly. Some of them are learning more quickly than the others. And I believe that one of the agencies that's really learning very quickly is the Office of Naval Intelligence. Boy, they'd hate to hear that, but that's the truth. You know, the poor Navy hasn't got much to do these days. Float around the ocean and lob a few grenades at people and, you know, shoot at Iraq every once in a while. And what else have they got to do? So they went into the intelligence business big time. And because of that, they brought in a lot of folks that are bright or outside their box. And they are slowly learning how to get to the point where, I hate to say this, but like most everybody here on this Zoom conference is. And if they're listening in, hi guys, good to see you again. But the thing I want to talk about, the hybrid thing, this is a really difficult subject because there's, first of all, we're hybrids. We're all Anunnaki hybrids. So they're hybrids of hybrids of hybrids. And it gets to be a situation where you have to look at each hybrid program as an individual faction. For instance, let's take the Zeta Reticuli, which is the common hybrid program that we're talking about. And we're talking about Greys who are taking human DNA and combining it with them in order to save their own species. They blew their planet up. And so they came barreling into our dimension and found this wonderful planet of ours full of humans with great DNA. They've been stripping that stuff out of us and recreating their race. So you have that issue. You have the hybrids that have been created that are human DNA and other alien DNA. And some of those are what are starting to filter into our society now, called precursors. The Yahyel ships, which were the Phoenix Light ships. The Yahyel have been flying around over trying to get our attention. Well, on board, they've got what they call the children. The children are DNA hybrids that are already filtering into the society, both as adults, called adult precursors, and also as I believe one of the ladies said about the crystal children, the indigo children, and the unusual children. And a lot of these people are the first of these. They're here to set a vibration, set a tone, to make it easier for the transformation that we're all starting to see happening, which is ultimately going to lead to face-to-face contact. And it's my opinion that face-to-face contact is going to come with those hybrid children, and with the Yahyel as the second round, because they look a lot like us. They look almost exactly like us, as a matter of fact. It's very difficult to pick out. You'll pass hybrid alien precursor folks on the street, you won't even know that you've done it, unless you're really highly tuned to that type of frequency. And I know a few people that are, and they said, oh, there goes one, and I just go, there's a brunette. I mean, it doesn't register with me, but it does with a lot of folks. So we have to take a little bit of a step back and say, what hybrid programs are we talking about? What is trying to be accomplished? Is it the recreation of a civilization? Is it the precursors who are helping us toward the first face-to-face ET contact? And the people that have said that they think it is winding down, I'm more like the gentleman who said that he seems to think it's ongoing, and I think it is too. I think it's ongoing in this respect, though. I think we're getting more and more and more of these hybrid extraterrestrial humans who are now showing up in our societies, and I believe that they're going to be more dominant. We're going to find them more often. We're going to find that frequency more often, because the times are coming, and they're coming very quickly. I'd say 10 years, 15 at the most, before we have hard ET contact. It's a collective consciousness thing. We're getting there. We're not there yet. But we could get there a lot more rapidly than that. And the extraterrestrials understand this. The hybrid makers understand this. And they're part of helping us get to what a lot of people call ascension. I just call it simply, as you say, Grant, one in consciousness and all. And that's about what I have to say on that.
Hey, Walter, one question for you and for everybody there. My big question is, do you believe world governments are already on board with this issue from a big picture overview, meaning United States, Russia, China, all the different major governments have already made some sort of behind the scenes agreement on their awareness of this? Or do you believe this is every man for himself, that this is every government working on their own with the phenomena and deciding how, why, when, so on, so and so to let this out? Because my take, or at least my instinct, is that world governments have somehow made an agreement, because there's no province of like one geographical area to another where these experiences are happening. China could release everything. Russia could release everything. But if Russia releases everything, what does that do to the United States? So what is your and everybody's feeling on whether is there one big global watchdog over this, or is it a free-for-all?
I'm in agreement with you, Doug. I think there's an underground interaction between at least the major governments that says we have got to respect each other's territories here. And we have to respect each other in a way that any one of us could create a lot of problems for other governments, for our own governments, for the lying that's been going on since July of '47 with Roswell. So I think that there is that. I don't have any information, and I don't see anything that points directly to that interaction. I'm not a big guy that says it's the Bilderberg conferences, for instance, but I don't see how it can't be, Doug, just for the reasons that you say. There's just too much of the emphasis on this within each individual government. Now, as far as our interaction, heck, Grant, you had William Trinette on the other day. And William and Paul Handon, the physical medium, have written a wonderful series of books about the Zeta population. And one of the things that the Zetas have come through and said that they have shared bilocation technology, what we call jump room technology, going back 10 or 15 years ago. Well, if we have a race sharing with the Central Intelligence Agency a technology which can take you from physical reality as we know it and put you into a simulated quantum environment which looks exactly like physical reality. You can't tell the difference from it. And they can make you come and go, and they do this in partnership with the intelligence agencies. Well, they've been doing that, thinking that they've done more than that and much less than that. It's just a natural consequence of that, of those transactions. So I think, Doug, to kind of rack your question again, is I think there are very significant underground cross-the-board communications. Again, at least with the major governments. But if it's happening, I tell you where it might be happening, where it's the easiest place to cover it up, it's through corporate America. And so the Northrops and the Boeings and the Lockheeds and yada yada and all those big players who sit in each other's boardrooms and turn each other's turnstiles with employees and come in and out of the DOD, and they're so intrinsically entwined in getting bids and making technology and bringing technology out at reasonable rates and at predetermined rates. I think that's where it's happening. And as you probably know, Doug, that's probably where all of the power bees are anyway.
I think you're onto it, because I think a lot of this has been put in private organizations, private corporations, so that when people come looking with Freedom of Information Acts and this and that, and why won't they release this? Why won't they release that? They don't have it to release. It's like a shell game. They move it into the proper areas where it can't be gotten at, because you wouldn't even know who to ask. You would never even know, who am I going to direct this? So I agree with you. And I mentioned in the chat, I think the other reason is to prevent any kind of world accident by a misidentification of some sort of ship or being or something over a particular country, that we can't have this situation where we're mistaking a ICBM for something else. And to me, at the very, very top of security of all nations, there has to be some sort of agreement that we're on the same page with what's real-time Earth or the unknown. And that unknown can trick I mean, look what these saucers and lights and so on have done over nuclear bases, shutting missiles down. And there's plenty of testimony on that from so many. So that, to me, it's a very, very critical thing. And I just can't imagine, if it's real at all, I can't imagine that the world governments are not on top of this.
Well, I agree with you. And I think you made a very good point about mysterious craft in the sky and how that has to be handled. And, you know, we think about NORAD and all the other radio arrays that we have that to keep up with all this kinds of information. And I do know for a fact that there is a whole second tier of satellite information gathering that is strongly connected between major companies, and that they pass this information on much more quickly than they pass on when an airplane comes flying into a green screen at Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta. So I think you're right. I think there's a lot more communication. And the funny thing about it, though, is, Doug, is that with all of that communication and all that background stuff going on like that, and all these agreements and whatnot, going back to the idea of consciousness, they're still doggone clueless.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of funny if you stop and think about it. We can send people to the moon and other places, and yet we can't seem to get our intelligence agencies and our governments on the same page when it comes to just simple things like consciousness.
Yeah, and I want to make that point because Doug, you actually talked to Ron, who's considered at one point the top scientist in CIA, and he basically assured you, Doug, we don't have it. I mean, we haven't got this stuff. But he did talk about the portal technology, this jump room technology, where I got that video off Princess's website, and then he was upset because I got it, where he says to those people in the room, not realizing it's going to get out, next time we go to the desert, a number of us in this room will go into the next world and come back again. So they have that. But when it comes to anti-gravity, he basically says, no, we don't have it. And the other point, and because it's this compartmentalization thing, where what you do is you take a big problem, you break it down into little sections, and you give one to the Navy, you give one to the Army, one to this DARPA, and nobody's talking to each other. So there's no coordination as to what's going on. And there's a story told to me about John Alexander going to Jim Semivan. Now, Jim Semivan is the co-director of To the Stars, and who had the beings in his room in the early 1990s, and they brought George Tenet in to tell him to leave it alone, and they brief him when he leaves, and he has this encounter, and he's trying to figure out what's going on, and John Alexander comes and says, okay, who's running it? And he's referring to what agency's running it, and Jim Semivan just says, they are. And I think Walter would agree, whatever this phenomena is, it is in control. That we have almost no control over what this thing is doing.
Yeah, Grant, I kind of agree with you. And I think, Ron always has to answer me, and I always listen to him through two filters. One, he's a friend of mine, and he's going to tell me some stuff every now and then that's like something that even if I was to quote him on is not too important, because of course he's a smart guy and he's not going to say anything that he doesn't that he has to either renege or say I didn't say that or whatever. But he tends to always play down our military. Ron always plays down our military. He says we don't have what people think we have. We just don't have it. And at the same time, you hear the stories of Lockheed and Skunk Works and this and that and all the different things that have been developed way back in the day when we didn't even know we had anything like that, like the stealth bomber. What was it designed, or it was released in the 60s, 50s or 60s, something like that. And then, you're thinking this is during the Gulf War. This is like the first time you're seeing this. It's been sitting around for all this time. So I don't know if it's just his talking points that he has to hold a certain line. And that line is to not yield on a number of topics and just keep it fuzzy. But there's been enough things to leak through. In fact, one of my UFO photos that I showed Princess, his wife, she scratched her head over it for a while, and she came back and said to me something to the degree that it may be a Lockheed. It may be Lockheed. So now you have to understand, the thing that I showed her appeared and disappeared in the middle of nothingness. It was a sky. It appeared. It came out of nowhere. as if it almost uncloaked itself. I got 2 or 3 photographs of it, good photos. And Ron has seen it, Princess has seen it. And I sent it to her and I said, what do you make of this? Tell me what you think. And she looked at it for quite a while. And she said, it looks to me like something from Lockheed. Now, what did she mean, something from Lockheed? How is she aware that Lockheed has something? Because I did give her a full description that it appeared, it didn't fly in, and it didn't fly away. It appeared, it made its form. I caught it on 3 little photographs, and then it completely turned into nothingness, as if it went out into like through the fabric of space. And she said it looks like it's Lockheed. So her answer wasn't something like, well, we don't, or Lockheed, or nobody has anything like that. Her answer was to throw out a guess that maybe this is something from Lockheed, like as if they have that technology, which would then fly in the face of what Ron would say. So
I want to say, Ralph Ring and Howard, is it Metker or Metzner? That they brought evidence a long time ago that our government, or not our government, whoever the shadow government is, or whoever those people are that are doing this, have anti-gravity, that they've been experimenting with it, that, so it's kind of hard to pin down, I think.
Well, even Ron is, as head of CI science, he was a compartmentalized agent.
Sure.
And I think that if you went to Doug and you asked him, he'd say, yeah, there's probably a lot of things I don't know about that I don't know about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I told Grant the only straight answer he gave me that I believe was a straight answer once was I asked him, do we have that? He goes, can't give you that answer. I said, what about this? He goes, well, I can't tell you that. I said, what about this? He said, well, that's classified. And then I finally said, Ron, is the phenomena real? He said, yes, it is. So that was interesting. Now, that would cover Ron, because if someone said, Ron, you told this artist friend of yours the phenomenon is real. Well, what's the phenomena? What's Doug talking about? In other words, there's always a gray area where we're not really sure of terminology. Do we mean ghosts? Do we mean, you know what I mean? Like, what are we talking about here? But yes, he did say the phenomenon is real. And he also said to me when I was over at his house one time, he said, there's a lot of good stuff out there. He said, because we were talking about Grant's site and some of the things that were being discussed on Grant's site. He knows that Grant and I are good friends, and he likes Grant. Ron likes Grant. I said, he said to me, Doug, there's a lot of good stuff out there. It's just a matter of digging through the garbage. He said, there's a ton of garbage out there. And he said, and that is the hard part, is digging through the garbage. He goes, but it's out there. So he's not like, if there was nothing to this entire thing, why would Dr. Ronald Pandolfi spend any time on any of this stuff? It wouldn't make any sense.
Okay, Desta, you had a third person that wanted to speak.
Yeah, there's 3 more now. Tiffany,
good.
Kat, and Sinead.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I just had something to add to this. I did work for the Department of Defense while I was in Greece, and I do feel like I was placed in that position. I think it was a strategic placement, and I think it was in order for them to have a little bit more access to me, allowing me to be put in situations that where I was alone, where I was still protected in a sort of way. But my grandfather was in the Strategic Air Command, and he died a few years ago. But before he died, he'd written over 1,000 short stories and poems, and a lot of them had to do with his work. And a lot of it was very confusing. I never really followed any sort of format. Sometimes it just seemed like a bunch of babble. But before he died, I asked him, I said, is there a reason for me having these experiences? What if I were to tell you that I've been in contact with all of these different beings? He said, well, I would have to say that you're crazy. And it's like, okay, do I look crazy? Do I act crazy? What do you mean? He said, read my lips. I would have to say you're crazy. And he died only a few days after that, but he said, I'm leaving all of my papers and all of my writings to you. And I mean, I have dozens of files that I haven't even been through. I've got, 800 stories that I haven't read. And I think that it was all sort of in a plan. I think there was a plan. I think there was a reason for me going down that line and going to that place and being part of that situation. But I do think there are some people out there who have the information who just are incapable of sharing. And that's the scary part, is that the information's there. It's just, how do we get to it? How do we get to those people who've been sworn to secrecy? How do we come by the information? Will it just fall into our lap like my positions? Will it just fall into your lap? Or do you reach out and keep reaching out and keep talking to people? What is the best way to do it? I mean, you guys here, there's a plethora of information, but we still are fighting to get, freedom of information on a day-to-day basis about little aircraft that are flying. It's hard to get the information, and that's what's so frustrating. Even in our day and age with the internet and being able to connect with people, it's just frustrating not being able to get the information.
Well, sometimes it gets dropped off. Now, Grant may have seen the documents. My friend in New York, Buddy from Alien Protocols, was given 2 sets of documents, and we got to see some of that, and it frightened him. And some of that referred to the ability to cloak any of our ships and missiles. And I think that scared him very much. So, Grant, did you ever get to see those? Did he send them to you? Hard copies?
Not the cloaking ones. I saw the ones from Mellon's website and some of the other stuff that he'd gotten. The thing was him, and Walter can chime in on this too, is like he told the story where they drop it off on, in his truck, and he sees the guy and he's chasing the guy, and the documents are on the front windshield under the wiper. And so it's always this thing that people are being fed stuff. And so is it to get you the right direction, or is it to misdirect you and send you off in sort of like throwing mud in the waters? But he definitely was. And I think he even had contact with Ron Pandolfi at one point. So
he had a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting story.
Well, I had strange experience last year, and regarding this cloaking, and again, it's maybe all of this is directed to people for a reason. Out in the backyard meditating, and I'm hearing this roar like a jet. I'm on the jet path, the landing path for several airports, but nobody should be that low. But I'm seeing lots of low clouds, and all of a sudden a jet comes through, and he's flying way lower than he should, and it was military. So I watched, and he was low enough that I waved, and he got heading towards Sacramento, and the frickin' thing vanished. So yeah, they've got the technology. I just cheered because I had already heard about it from Buddy. And then if anybody that did hear about it, some of the president's speeches intimated that, yes, we now have the ability to have our jets. They're better than anybody else's, and you can't see them. I think he meant that more than just radar invisible. So that was pretty exciting to see.
Just to comment on that, I've started to think that may actually be the beings that are doing this. If you remember at the beginning of the show, Mark talked about Tony. Some of the photographs that Tony has are of helicopters like 40 feet over his head. And one's a British military helicopter, one is a police helicopter, but these things are all very, very low. And what you'll have is experiencers who will describe the fact that the morning after they had an encounter, the thing was there. Or Chris Bledsoe, his father sees a helicopter over his house, 20 feet over his house, hovering over his house. And the guy, you could see the guy clear as day. Chris was not at home at the time, but you have this thing where experiencers have these helicopters or planes and stuff like that around them all the time. And you start to wonder, how does the government know so fast, or why would they be following experiencers around or just hovering over their house?
I'm wondering if it's a frequency thing, because when I had my major sightings, I had been in a very deep state of meditation.
Yeah.
And even Stephen Greer had mentioned that if you were trying to play with any of that stuff and you were touching those frequencies, that they could pick up on that and they would send somebody over right away to pick it up. And when I started talking with Buddy and other people about what happened over my house, within days, I had helicopters flying very low over, and it was still before dusk. So I took out my tablet and I started aiming and photographing them. But when I played it back, all I could see was a red light. So what are we seeing?
Yeah. Another thing with it is, but when Tony took photograph, and I've showed it in a couple of lectures, he takes a photograph of this real low helicopter over his head with a UFO in the photograph. So I put it out on Facebook, and I must have got a dozen people that produced helicopter photographs with UFOs in the photograph. And it's like, then I was starting to think, like, it's almost like a red flag. It's like, something's wrong here. This doesn't make any sense in terms of, and in fact, John Alexander maintains absolutely, and I saw the investigation, this one with these 23 helicopters, with this one in Texas back in the 70s or whatever, absolutely maintains, they maintain that these were not U.S. Air Force helicopters, even though they look like U.S. helicopters. So you look at the ability of this phenomena to screen image owls, planes, butterflies, all these screen imaging, that we know they can do this screen imaging thing. And it comes down to this idea of, when you see something, are you really seeing what you think you're seeing?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I use Flight Radar 24, and I started noticing a lot of things that were not showing up on Flight Radar, and they weren't showing up on Heavens Above as satellites, and they were too low to be anyway. So and I've been interviewed by Dr. Burks because of a healing I had and these sightings, and he says it's screen imaging, and I would tend to believe that. And we are talking about them being directed for us specifically. Well, I was a big time Star Trek fan. So when I had my ship show up and then take off like at warp speed, it dawned on me. They gave me a presentation that I could totally relate to. And the first time it happened, I thought, okay, I've been meditating. Maybe it's a hallucination, and I let it go. And then it happened again a month later, and I just started laughing. What took you so long? The answer came back, well, what took you so long to open up and be perceptive to something that was very different?
Beautiful. Who's next, Esther?
Sinead.
Sinead, huh?
Yay.
Go ahead, Sinead.
Okay. I forgot I was going to speak. I kind of lost my train of thought, but I think I was going to respond to Grant, something you said, and Douglas, what you were saying too. And Kat, by the way, just as a side note, I love the books you have behind your head there in your bedroom. Great reading list. Anyway, I think what I was going to say is, I love this topic of what is the government doing or not doing, and like, what kind of machines are we seeing, and what are UFOs and all this stuff. It's great. It's fun. It's fascinating. And because of the natural duality that exists in everything, at the same time, I also don't really care. And part of the reason that I don't really care is because I don't think that that's what this is about, really. Not for me, anyway. For me, it's about, and this is one of the reasons, and I think Kat will connect with this as well, this is one of the reasons why I really appreciate Costa Macraeus, because he is all about the people's disclosure movement. He's about, and Grant, you're like this too, because you're focusing on the stories that people are telling, the average human on the ground who doesn't have a whole lot of power, who isn't making bajillions of dollars and doesn't know all the secrets that are happening around the world. Our experiences are just as valid as the knowledge that the government has, and our power is just as valid as theirs. The fact that we live in this societal structure where like it's the government that has all the power, it's such an illusion. It's really not true. We have so much power, and here we are coming together right now in this group because of you, Grant. And there's people connecting like this all over the world, and we're becoming more and more of a community, a global community. And, you know, we are so powerful. There's so much that we can do to, just by sharing our experiences and validating each other and learning from each other and listening to each other. And, you know, I really don't think it's about like what shape was the alien's body and like what did the ship look like what was the, I think we're really caught up with physicality in this culture, in our social conditioning. We're so caught up with the bodies of things, and I don't care. I really don't. For me, like, I don't know what my guides look like, and if I never see them, they never reveal themselves to me and tell me what their name is or what they look like. I actually don't care, because to me it's about the feeling I have of connection with them, the things they're telling me, the things I get to share with them, the experience of my consciousness getting to another level by just having communication with them. You know, I think that's the value that all of us have and all of us experience, is this raising of vibration in ourselves, in each universe of each individual person is a universe. And so, you know, this raising of our own vibration, opening of our hearts and minds and raising our consciousness, and the fact that that's happening more and more all over the world, to me, that is the real power. That is the real important core of all of this. And so whether or not the government does disclosure or doesn't do disclosure or labels certain kinds of ships as being whatever, I really don't care. I care that this is real. It's happening. We're living this. We know that this is the matrix and it's not real. It's an illusion. We know that our bodies, this isn't me, right? Like, I am inside this container, just like all of us are inside the containers of our bodies, and we're going to move on to another body or become something else when we die. So to me, it's about this connection of mind and heart, and the truth of that, and the incredible wisdom and power that exists within that. So I love all the government stuff and the conspiracy stuff, and I love all that. It's fun, it's fascinating, it's real, it's valid for sure. But to me, I also, at the same time, equally, you know, hand in hand with that interest, I also don't care. And I hope everybody understands what I mean by that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of great stuff there, Sinead. I've been reading, and well, I listen on audiobook because I'm a bit dyslexic, so I like books on audio tape. I've been listening to Seth Speaks. I'm going through the second listening of it. In fact, I've probably been through the second and maybe even the third, and I just keep going back and forth to it. And this is so echoed in the teachings and the writings of Seth through that channeling scenario. That is exactly the same thing. It really is irrelevant. We are locked into the smallest view of our identity as a physical thing, and the physicality is so unbelievably convincing. And it is, I haven't been able to work my way around it. It is so convincing that we are convinced that this is what we are, this is who we are in this container. And it's these out-of-body experiences, these great experiences that all different people are having, these near-death experiences, these deja vu, this whatever it is you want to talk about, these lucid dreams that are giving us the inkling into that other world, the world where we really do belong and where we really are. But the illusion is so fantastic. So I'm fine with anybody calling it anything. It doesn't matter. I know Chris Bledsoe doesn't like to call it alien. They're angels as far as he's concerned. They're watchers. There are beings. There are guides. They've been with us since the beginning of time. Call it whatever you like, but I agree with you. Ultimately, it really doesn't matter.
Well, I'd like to make one quick point on this. In terms of, I always say, as what happened in the New York Times article, what Sinead was bringing out, so what? So let's say the government comes out tomorrow and says, it's all for real. You guys are right all along. So what do you do then? As Sinead will get up tomorrow and go back to teaching, Doug will do another painting, and it basically comes down to you and I, all of us have had some interaction with this phenomena for whatever reason. We got to figure out why we're here on Earth, what we're supposed to be doing, and how we're going to answer for ourselves when we leave the thing. And it really doesn't matter whether the government knows. And the other thing that I would point out is, Sinead brought up the point that we have a lot of power. I was told that well, Doug mentioned that Ron Pandolfi watches what I do, and I was told the Semivan and Putoff watch everything that I do. So what you got to realize here is that we are the ones having the experiences. We are the ones that everybody is watching because they're trying to figure it out as well. And I can guarantee that everything that is being said here, they're monitoring and they're watching because I don't think they know. I think all the people here are the ones that are talking to the intelligence and are the people who have the answers. They are not in contact with the intelligence, and they are watching us very closely, trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, Grant, because I think the reason we're not going to get disclosure from the government is because they're coming at it from a strictly materialistic viewpoint.
Yeah.
And this phenomena is clearly not materialistic. I mean, it is materialistic, but it's way more than that. And it does have to do with consciousness. And it does have to do with all of our experiences in terms of interconnecting with the fabric of this, whatever that is. I mean, if you just look at synchronicities, and even for like a screen memory, I have the flu. I'm sorry.
You told me that. I'm glad you showed up.
But you're talking about the helicopters and the things flying around. I just brought up on memory of a synchronicity. I did a reading for someone who happened to have my maiden last name, but then I noticed that this person also was a guy had my father's birthday, my father's birthday. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Our last name and my dad's birthday. And just as I was thinking that, this Chinook helicopter flies past my window. Well, now I live, in a residential area over here, not anywhere close to a military base or anything like that. Chinook helicopters also are quite rare in these days. This was a couple of years ago. You just don't see them. My dad flew Chinook helicopters in Vietnam. So, how much of those kinds of things happen because of our own personal consciousness, our own personal consciousness interacting with the larger consciousness? That's my question, and I think that's the thing that needs to be examined more closely in this whole picture, because I do think disclosure is happening through us individually based on our individual input to what's happening with the larger picture.
Beautiful.
Yeah, if I can actually respond to you for a minute, Candace, just really briefly, I love that what you just said, because I think when we are sitting here waiting for governments, it's like everyone's so caught up with when is the government going to disclose? When are they going to do it? They have all these secrets, they know all this stuff. How come they're not telling me that? I think as long as we remain really caught up in waiting for the government to disclose, we're giving our power away. And it's like, to me, no offense to anyone who has religious beliefs, I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. And part of the reason why I'm not religious is because, to me, this is just my experience, there's too much dogma. But if we think of, the commonly understood religious perspective that there is a God and that God, controls our lives and makes certain things happen to us, if we believe in that, this is just my opinion, then we are also giving our power away, right? It's like, we believe that God has the upper hand, that we don't have autonomy and choice and free will in our own lives to make things happen. And to me, we sort of perceive the government in a similar way, like the government is godlike and they have all the power and all the money and all the whatever. And we're just the little worker ants, but we're not just the little worker ants. We are so much more powerful than we think that we are. And the more power, the more that we come together as we are doing here in this room right now, here all over the world, in our country, in our communities, this power is growing and growing and growing. And it's so exciting and wonderful, because if we get caught up in thinking about the external things that we see happening, the government having power over us, or all the so-called terrible things that are happening in the world, we're not paying attention to the fact that whenever there is one thing, there is the opposite of that thing, right? Like you can't have the sun without the moon. You can't have light without dark. You can't have good without bad. Doug, you were talking about that earlier, right? The duality of everything it exists hand in hand. So how can we say that everything is crap in the world right now? You know, the fact that it isn't crap in the way, not everything is crap. I mean, there are terrible, awful things happening all over the world, yes, but that's because we're fed all that stuff. Like that's what's coming through to us through the news, right? But if we pay attention to all the other amazing, wonderful things that are happening in the world, all the incredible, wonderful people who are doing incredible things, and focus on these conversations we're having here with each other and really listening to each other's experiences, that has equal power. And I just hope that more and more and more we will become aware of that and feel that and feel it in our everyday life, in our everyday spiritual practice, so that we can continue to raise that feeling that we have, which is a vibration and a consciousness, you know, when we're aware of that in this state right now, in this room, in this conversation. The more we live that every day as much as we can, the more it spreads. It affects other people. All of us have experienced that, right? That when we change ourselves, other people respond. They know, right? Whether or not they think like this or not. So it's just such a powerful thing. I'm going to stop myself because I could keep rambling. But yeah, the government, it's an illusion. It's not real.
Well, and I would also say, Sinead, thank you for all of that. I would also say that the government knows just enough to be dangerous, you know, because they're coming from this strictly materialistic viewpoint. They're not ever going to get it, you know, which is why they're looking to us, because we can come at it from an experiencer viewpoint. There is more of a spiritual connection with it. I mean, you can't help, I think, you can't help but have some spiritual leanings, having had these kinds of experience, you know, and so that, you know, that's why we'll always be more powerful. You say equally powerful. I say more powerful. I say because that's really where it is. They'll never have that until they get on board with it, if they ever will, which I doubt.
I'd like to say something to add to that, Candace, is that they're just people. The government are people. This is something that has to be remembered. They're people. When I go to see the Pandolfis, they're not this weird thing I was told about before meeting them, that, you know, oh, and I'm going to be sorry, I'm going to be dragged into this cauldron of evil and all sorts of stuff is going to happen to me. They're people. I go sit on a picnic out on the lawn with Ron and Princess, and we watch a show for children. It's just an amazing experience. They also have spiritual experiences. They are people. They feel the same things we do. They may be under a protocol that you or I or anyone else would be under if we joined whatever that was. If you joined whatever particular thing that was and swore an oath and said, I'm going to work for the so-and-so organization, this is my job now, and these are the ground rules, whether it's Area 51 or S4 or this or that, you're expected to hold to that for reasons that were determined. Otherwise, you shouldn't have joined up for it. So again, I just want to remind everyone that we are the ones who name things good and bad. We are the name, you know, someone has a car accident, like Grant said earlier, who said it's a bad thing? It on surface, everyone's like, oh my God, we're so sorry that happened to you. And 6 months later, you find out it was the greatest thing in the world. So we have to try to not fall into these language traps of they are the this, we are the that, we are ahead of them, they're behind us, we are more enlightened, they're not. I don't buy into any of this stuff. I just take everything on an individual basis and think to the fact that I'm just a person like they are. And so in a way, I don't blame the government for doing what they do. They must have a reason for doing it. So, you know, whether it's a reason I agree with or not, it could be national security. It could be any number of things. It's the way it is. And I just wanted to interject that.
I wasn't trying to disparage anybody, just saying these folks are in the dark. I mean, all of us are more powerful who have the capacity for spiritual engagement, because I think that's what this is about. And so those people can have spiritual experiences, whether or not they're living through that is another thing. And so, you know, it's just I'm just saying that's where the power is. The power is definitely in the consciousness and in the awareness of consciousness and acting on it from that place rather than being strictly materialistic. So if those folks are following a protocol and if that's where they are with it, God bless them. You know, I mean, let them do what they're doing. They're providing the contrast for the rest of us to move up. You know, so that's okay too.
I always like quotes. The quote that applies here is, "We are the ones we've been waiting for."
Yeah.
Well,
So
Candace, you mentioned your
Candace,
Chinook helicopter. Oh, go ahead, Kat.
Sorry, super quick, Walter. Is that okay if I say something super quick? Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Candace, I totally understand what you're saying about the government being dangerous, and you know, I don't think anything that anyone is saying here can be dismissed because all of it is valid, right? It's all part of this whole situation. Each part of it is a piece. Each part's valid. I think in terms of thinking as the government thinking of the government as having enough power to be dangerous, it's true, and at the same time, you know, I can walk out my door and a piano can fall on my head, or I could be killed, or, you know, I mean, terrible things happen all the time, can happen all the time. And so I just want to say, for me, a big part of my spiritual practice anyway has been choosing to not live in a state of fear, right? Choosing to not live with fear, because if you live with fear, you draw things towards you that reflect that. So as we all know, what you hold inside yourself, in your mind, in your consciousness, that becomes your vibration, and that acts as a magnet, and then that attracts certain things to you. And I will not live in a state of fear. I refuse. The only thing I'm scared of is sharks. Honestly, I'm terrified of them, but you know, working on that, I think there's some symbolism involved. I'm muting myself now.
I think Sinead is right. You know, even from my experiences, I've had such a wide variety of what some people may view as being good and some people may view as being negative. I think that overall, I have learned to accept both sides and have gotten to a point where I try even to describe and express some of these experiences. I don't want to scare my children, but I do talk to them. They are starting to have experiences, and I have to let them know that, yes, there are some things that are a little bit scary, but each time you can learn to try to initiate conversation with them and see if there's some way to alleviate the fear from these experiences. And this is just based on contact experience and abduction scenarios, but I do feel that it does feed into the evolution of the human spirit and soul and what we're supposed to be. And I think that gaining that type of control over each situation will alleviate some of the fear too.
Candace, you mentioned your Chinook helicopters, and we create our own physical reality. We put it together. We're responsible for it. It's 100% our self-creation. And this kind of goes to Tiffany Mack too with her girls. If we don't like the physical reality that we have, we can just move on. We can prefer something else, and we will find ourselves switching to an earth or switching to a physical reality that's more to our preference. The only thing that prevents us from doing that is if that we enter life with these set challenges that we came in to get the experiences of. And if those experiences, in case of your girls, Tiffany Mack, I'm a dad, so I know where you're coming from. But if your girls came into this life with the intention of having those challenges, those experiences, one of the nice things, it's a kind of self-check that I have with my own children and with people that I know, is that I say, well, I really would prefer that they didn't have those, or they would prefer that they didn't have those. And then if you find that you end up having those, it's for a reason. And then that reason's a good reason. Now, that doesn't make it any easier on you, Mom, and I feel you on that. But maybe that'll help a little bit when they come up with these drawings and you have to talk to them and the fear starts to set in, which is nothing wrong with that. Fear's your friend. It's just telling you something's not right. You're out of alignment. And just let that guide you a little bit, and hopefully that'll help a bit. And Candace, next time you see one of those Chinooks, take a real close picture, will you? And tell them I said hello.
Yeah, we'll do, Walter.
There's one expression that ties into this. This is this famous, I always quote this, you can find it on the internet. It's a debate, not a debate, but a discussion between Bud Hopkins and John Mack in Boston. And they're discussing, and at one point, Mack says to Bud Hopkins, says, Bud, it's kind of strange. He says, I'm the psychiatrist here. You figure I'd be getting all the real crazy people, and I seem to be getting all the spiritual ones, and you seem to be getting all the bad cases. He said, maybe that has more to do with you and I than it does with the aliens. And that's this manifestation type thing. And it was strange how Bud got all the bad ones, and Mac was getting all the spiritual seeking ones. Is there anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Grant, yeah, you had to be careful with Bud because
you were regressed by Bud, correct? Twice.
Yeah, I was, and he kind of wanted to lead you down that road. Actually, is part of why he was getting the quote bad ones. But yeah, because and so that's why I gave up on working with him because I didn't believe what he was saying and where he was coming from.
But he sort of cut you off, didn't he? Didn't he sort of send you off, or you lost the second tape or something?
Yeah, yeah. There were 2 regressions and 2 tapes, and he accidentally left the second tape. It fell down in the couch of the person's house because he didn't live there; that he was visiting, and so the tape got left at her house, and then she called me and said, "Hey, I found this tape," and so I got it, and then I consequently lost it. I don't know what happened. Yeah, but he after the first session, I couldn't sleep that night. I mean, everything that came out of there was just pretty wild and shocking. And so the next day I went back, and he was all like, "Yeah, I'm going to put you in touch with all these people in New York, and you're definitely, you're definitely an abductee," is what he was going at it then. And I said, "Well, I still have questions." I don't know that I believe, or that I want to go down that road the way that it looks like it's going. I think I want to, explore a little further, something differently. And so he just, he lost interest immediately, and I think that's why, because I think he had a particular, I don't know if you call it a genre, but he had a particular area of folks that he wanted to work with, and that he made stars out of some of these people. And if you weren't that way, and if you weren't going that way, then he wasn't interested.
Yeah. Even Mike Clellan tells a story, because Mike Clellan had some regressions with him and dealt with him. And at one point he said, I think you're probably more suited to go to Leo Sprinkle. And he basically sent him to Leo Sprinkle because it wasn't going the way the other cases were going. And so he sort of shuffled them off to Leo, who is much more into the spiritual aspect of the way it is. So. Yeah,
I worked with Leo too. He's great. Yeah.
Anybody else want to say something before we shut down?
Walter,
go ahead.
I wanted to say something in response to Walter. And Walter, I'm not saying you said this. I'm just saying that, there's a lot of new age catchphrases that we all have. We make our own reality. We this, we that, blah, blah, blah. Everything's an illusion. There's a lot of wonderful things that I know the root of are true, but in application and in real life circumstance, I think people misunderstand a lot of this. I think it's very hard to really wrap your head around what you mean by you make your own reality. It's not something like you can sit here today and go, I'm going to be president, and now in a week you're president. You're not going to create your reality, but there is a way to create your reality. And a lot of this comes from Seth Speaks, which is to get a hold of your thoughts, which is very, very difficult. It's not easy to catch thoughts. Is like trying to make a cloud, a cloudless sky. and here come clouds. Clouds are just passing you. Those clouds are passing you because you have no control over them. They're your thoughts. They're random thoughts, and there is very little control over controlling your thoughts. It's like asking someone to not think of a pink elephant. Well, the first thing you're going to think of to not think of is the pink elephant. It's a conundrum. What it comes down to that I've been noticing and I've been practicing is a slow, steady turning like an oil tanker, turning the thought machine that in Doug's head, the one that wants to chatter the negativity of myself, or that you can't do it, or that you have no business doing this, to little by little every day make headway into that and turn those thoughts slowly. And I do believe through that slow process, I do believe the future does alter. That's my take on that idea.
Yeah, Doug, I think you've got something there for sure. I think it's very, very complex why the universe jumps in our lives the way it does. Past lives, and I mean, who knows what all is in there in terms of why and how we end up creating what we create and the direction we go in. I mean, not everybody needs to be president, whether they want to or not. That's just not what's in line for their own growth. And so I think that we are kind of in alignment with where we're heading as a soul, as a consciousness, as an individual consciousness connected to the whole. And that's what directs the life. That's just my take on it.
Do you think, Candace, it's a more of a subconscious thing that in the underpinning of your entire psyche, you're maneuvering your way in a certain direction that's not even maybe obvious to you on the outside when we go about our business?
Yeah, I would say that for sure.
I feel that, all of us have an artistic aspect to our being as well. So people who are used to thinking about a project or an idea and then using a certain type of media to create that, like Doug, your images that you paint are just amazing, but they don't come into being without some forethought and some practice and all of this. But don't you think that some of these more creative beings that we're relating to, you have to have a creative mind to even get to that level, that conscious level?
Are you asking me that, Tiffany, well, I think it's very funny. I think we're all creative, and I know then there becomes this big discussion about to what level or to what degree. What do we call, everyone can sing. I'm sure everyone on this panel here can sing. I'm sure nobody would want to hear most of us, but everyone can sing. It's a matter of how good do we sing? What do we mean by we can sing? So everyone can sing. Everyone can make a painting. Everyone can draw a figure. Everyone can do something. It's a matter of to what proficiency. So I do think that, I can just tell everyone right off the bat that I didn't start drawing or thinking about drawing or painting anything till I was about 17 years old. And prior to that, as a kid, I had what my brother would call absolutely zero art skills. I couldn't, as he would say, you couldn't draw a stick figure. You were horrendous. And he would draw these big road graders and cars and machines on the blackboard, and I'd be looking at him like, I don't know how he does any of this stuff. It wasn't until my intention, it's hard to explain, and I may be wrong about all this, but it wasn't until my intention was that I'm going to learn how to do this that I couldn't do it. And then all of a sudden I realized that I have what I consider, and Princess Celia and I always talk about this, problem solving. I'm more of a problem solver. I have a very, very good ability at solving problems. So if it's a song, how are we going to get this to work? I'll look at the language of music and I'll problem solve the song. If it's painting, I'll look at the language of visual art and I'll problem solve the painting. Now, I'm sure that takes a certain level of skill to begin with, but I'm very good at problem solving. And once I put my mind to it, I seem to be able to get into a particular thing. So I look at it more like that. I think everybody is creative. I think it's a matter of what track you want to jump on and pursue.
Doug, you better contact the Montreal Canadiens. They need your help. Some problems.
Hey, nobody, Grant, nobody can help the Montreal Canadiens. Nobody. They
Okay.
are in desperate condition. So
There you go. Okay.
we know that everybody knows Grant and I go back and forth on the Winnipeg Jets and the Montreal Canadiens.
Okay.
I
Beautiful,
just want
thanks.
to add that when it came down to it, I didn't start to I was not very artistic up until the point where I started having some of these experiences. And I would have, I would wake up in the morning and go into my craft room and find paintings that I'd made in the middle of the night and that I didn't remember doing, like mandalas and perfect circles, crazy. I didn't remember doing it at all. And that didn't start until I started about 5 or 6 years ago, when I really started having a lot more experiences. But I didn't know if that was sort of where some of our creativity was being elevated as well.
You mean you did them? You mean you didn't know you did them and you woke up the next day and saw them?
Correct.
Wow. Well, I'm not in your league. I haven't been there. That hasn't happened to me yet, but that's fascinating.
My daughter does the same thing. It's just sort of interesting.
Yeah, there is a big connection between say music and UFOs, and art and music UFOs. If you've ever seen, I don't know if you've ever seen the guys who do the channeling art. They're from South America, where they put them in the dark and they have these paintings, and the guy's blindfolded and he does these paintings of famous Van Gogh's paintings and stuff, and it's these guys doing it in the dark with the painting upside down. It's just, you start to see this connection that a lot of experience, I don't know what the number is, but and I can think of Steve Boucher from Canada, if you've seen his art, or Ron Johnson, experiencer in Salt Lake City. You see his art, it's the same thing. In fact, Tiffany, I had some of your art, and I was putting it together with a collection of a lot of experiencers and their art. It's unbelievable how many experiencers have this unbelievable art ability.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, I mean, just looking at Doug's pictures in the background just reminded me of that.
I still think some of Doug's are painting or photographs. The one with the car. When he does the one with the car, I go, "Come on, this is not a painting." Come on.
No, that's a crazy piece of work. Grant, Ron would always say, about all this kind of stuff. Ron would say, well, Doug, you want to know how I figure out what anything's real or a hoax or not? He goes, I never ask a scientist. He goes, I consult with a magician. and he would go to the Amazing Randy. Do you know the name The Amazing Randy?
Yeah.
He would go to the Amazing Randy and call up Randy and go, hey, Randy, I got this guy. He says he can paint in the dark, upside down, this and that. I know how he does it, and that's how we would solve his problems.
Does anybody have something they want to say? Some people haven't been on. We got some of the European people before we shut down here. Oh, from Spain. Hello, Hazel. Beautiful.
No problem.
Welcome.
Thank you first for the invite. Can I just say that when you're a kid, you can't articulate what you've experienced or what you think. And it's not until you get older, you suddenly realise and you start to put things together, which is why I got in contact with you in the first place. And it's very hard to try and put the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together and make any sense of it.
Tell a little bit about your experience so people know what we're talking about here.
Well, as I said to you the other day, when I was very young, 5, 6, something like that, we used to live in a big old Victorian house, and me and my 2 brothers shared a bedroom because we was all very young. When my oldest brother used to get out of his bed, I would sneak in because it was nice and warm, because where I slept was by the door and it was drafty. And he'd go off to junior school, and my mum come in with a cup of tea with a cup and saucer, and she put it down beside the bed and said to me, now drink it before it goes cold. And I felt very special because I've got the best china and my mum made me a cup of tea. So I've obviously nodded off back to sleep. I woke up and the cup and saucer was no longer there. So I've got myself my dressing gown on, I've gone downstairs, I'm expecting Mum to be a bit disappointed that I didn't drink the tea that she made me. She never made me a cup of tea. She never come into my bedroom at all. But I know what she was wearing. I knew the way her hair was dressed. Now, this didn't fall into place until I was watching Donna Lynn speak, and she mentioned a lady that saw Shirley Temple, but it wasn't Shirley Temple in her bedroom. And I thought, God, that happened to me when I was a kid, and it starts falling into place. But when you're a child, you can't articulate the right words to explain it. And it's not, as I said, it's not until you're older, it starts falling into place, and then you start wanting to make some sense of it. Hence why I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Beautiful. I appreciate that, especially. And you were used to be in Britain, but you've moved to, and we had a photograph. Next
Yeah, I
time
live in Spain.
we will definitely do the photograph that your son drew, because Tiffany was talking
Yeah.
about this, where you suddenly realize your kids may have something. So your son did a drawing, and we didn't send it with this one, but the next time we send out the invite, we'll just send the photograph out just for people to sort of comment. Somebody may know what he was drawing, but it was kind of an unusual painting that he did, or a drawing.
Yeah, but he's now 21, but he's not. We call it woo woo. He's not into the woo woo like I am. But he's had a couple of dreams where he thought he could. Well, he didn't think he was speaking German and Japanese. But the moment he sat up in bed, it all went.
Yeah.
Another dream he had was recently, and he had this gadget, and he drew it. He said, "Mum, got any idea what that is?" I said, "I've not got a clue. Not got a clue." And I sent it to you.
Yes, and we'll send it around. Maybe somebody has an idea of what this is, because it's a pretty elaborate drawing. It's pretty
Well,
clear.
but when you were speaking about blood groups earlier, the RH negative,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that was something.
Yeah, it's one of those big puzzles. Nobody really knows, except that there's a high number of people.
Yeah.
Sometimes they actually do in a lecture, they'll say, how many people have RH negative? And you see all these hands go up, and you just go like, wow. It's like, and a lot of people don't know. And then when they check, they find out, oh yeah, I am too. It's like, probably a lot of people here today will be going to find out what their blood type is. And that's when you start to realize, is this a random phenomena? Because that's the thing that when I got the download is it a random world? If it is, that's one world. But if it's not random, if it's following a pattern, it's a completely different world.
I think it's random when it happens, but you don't realize it until you group it all together and you think, well, no, this isn't normal.
Yeah.
Because your friend you're having coffee with doesn't get these sort of things, and the woman over the road doesn't get these sort of things. So you think, well, my, for a long while they used to think I was a bit woo-woo that way, but it's not that at all. You just don't realize it until you've got a lump of situations or synchronicities or ever repeating numbers and all sorts of funny things. And then at 62, you start thinking, this is something going on, and I'd like to be a part of it, and I want to find out.
Well, thank you for adding. Yeah, go ahead, Sinead.
Hazel, I feel like responding to what you said about your mom and the cup of tea. I wonder if this is because we are really multidimensional beings, right? So we're existing in many different dimensions at the same time, with everyone else existing in multiple dimensions at the same time. And children are so open and uncluttered and, not filled with all this conditioning that we have as adults that we have to undo in order to tap into things. So I wonder if as children, we're able to kind of walk in and out of different dimensions, or move in and out of different dimensions just more fluidly, because we have less mental attachment to the reality that we think is the only reality, right? Like we're so much more, as children, we're so much more fluid in our thinking, and our imaginations are incredibly vivid. We're incredibly creative. We can play with anything. We can make anything into a play session. Like you can take a stick and a rock and make something with it, right? So I wonder if, because children have such elastic minds and elastic perceptions, I wonder if that's what happened to you. You know, if you witnessed, if you were suddenly in another dimension of your own self, but still you, but in another dimension with your mom also in another dimension. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I've not heard that explanation before. I was, when I was listening to Donna Lynn on a video that she done, it was more a case of perhaps beings come to you as something that you're familiar with. But your explanation, I've never thought of that before or heard it before. So now there's two possibilities.
There's a film you might be interested in, Hazel. It's called, I think, Interstellar, with oh God, what's his name? All right. You know, that dude.
Matthew McConaughey.
Thank you, Matthew McConaughey, and some other terrific actors. And the film is about that. It's about these astronauts actually who go into space, and all this amazing stuff happens, but they discover that reality is not reality. And there's an interaction that the main character, Matthew McConaughey, who's an astronaut, has with his daughter, that it's about space and time being totally nonlinear. And you might find it interesting, Hazel.
You know, I'm sorry, real briefly, also, Sinead, Seth Speaks talks about exactly what you're talking about, that within our own space, there's other dimensions and other universes that are coexisting within the space that we're in. And so we just have a lack of ability. You know, take, for example, the Icelandic people, and I've seen films on their fairies and elves and so on. There's a marvelous film made in Iceland about the fact that they do not teach their children out of the belief of the elves and the spirits and the little beings and the little creatures. In fact, they're so convinced that they're real that they'll move highways in a different position when they're going to build a highway. They won't go over these rocks where the elves live. They'll say, well, we can't do that. They respect the elves. And so the children are encouraged to believe in this kind of thing. And because of that, they have a far greater affinity for ghosts and spirits and little voices and little elves and things than we do. We're convinced out of it. So I just wanted to mention that, what you said.
Well, it's the same with Peruvians. Like, one of the things I really loved about Peru, and that added to my experience of being there, is that there's a cultural understanding in Peru that ETs are real. They just know that they are. They know they've always been there. They know that ETs helped to build their civilizations, that they communicated with the Inca. Peruvians just know. And so I had a really terrific conversation with this Peruvian guy on the plane on the way home about that. And it was just so cool. You know, when do you get to sit on the plane with some random person you've never met before and talk about stuff that means so much to you? And that elevates your thinking. It was great.
Wow.
One thing I can add to this, because I've done a lot of research on, you know, death and dying and reincarnation, and the research that was done with reincarnating children, they would get them 2, 3, 4 at the most. After 4, they didn't touch them. And these would be kids who were accustomed to reincarnation ideas in India, and they had 2,500 of these kids. I think it was University of Virginia, they were doing this research. And they would go, and the kid would get like 50 out of 51 things right. This is my uncle, this is this street, and take them to a town that the kid had never been to. As soon as the kid was about 4 or 5, it would fade. And by the time the kid was 7 years old, he didn't remember any of that anymore. And they'd always try to get the kid when he was very, very young, even before he was able to speak. And one of the ideas in the neurology thing, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think it's the corpus callosum is not formed properly between the two brains until they're 7 years old. So you have these signals going back and forth across the brains. Once the kid's 7 years old, and it's almost like the idea is that the idea with alien abduction, if you haven't been taken by the time you're 7 years old, you're not, because they couldn't care less about you. Then you've got all your ideas and all your biases, And I mean, they would need huge rubber boots and a big shovel to try to get an idea into your head because you've got it all made up already. So.
Yeah, Grant, the Dalai Lama, they started looking for the reincarnated 14th and 13th and all the rest of them when they were really young, so that they would still be in that place, in that realm, and could identify objects from their past life.
Wonderful. Okay, anybody got something to say before we shut down? Thank you very much, everybody, for showing up. And probably 2 weeks, we'll just send out an invite. If you've got time, you can drop in, drop out. It's the idea, you know, it's a come and go thing. And I appreciate everything everybody has said, and we will do it again. And the next time we'll send around that that drawing, and somebody may have some idea of what this drawing means.
And Grant, thank you so much for giving us this space to come and meet and share these experiences. You know, it's so appreciated. And Desta for doing her best to moderate when we all just couldn't shut up. She managed to get in there from time to time. So much gratitude for that. Thank you to both of you.
Hey, Grant.
Yeah.
Grant, I'd like to finally say, I got good news today, so I wanted to let you know. I now have, many of you know, I'm working on a musical about our topic. I've been working on it since 2017, and I found out today that I'm in the 7/8 of the way through the show, and I found out today I have a New York theater director who's going to take it up.
Right on, buddy. There you go.
So that's the beginning of my world as a collaborating artist, because I've been by myself for the last 3 years. But now I'm going to have to break this out to other writers, to stage people, and to a whole team of people that will help get this up on stage on a small theater, work out the problems, and then hopefully get it up to Broadway someday.
Beautiful. That's what I think that's what it's all about. I always say that we're like the gays of the 1960s. We're sort of gathering, we're getting bigger groups and stuff like that. And it's up to us to push it. And eventually we will get where we're going. And it's all a matter of a process. It's not so much what the result end is what's our role in this thing. If we believe that we came in here to do something, we have some sort of role. You've done yours, and it's the ability to find out what you're supposed to do and get doing it. So, and we are the people, as I said, we are the ones we've been waiting for. I always say the experiencers, and if you want to know the UFO phenomena, you're wasting your time with photos, you're wasting your time with medals. You should be talking to the people who are interacting with the phenomena. That's the only way we can do it. And I appreciate everybody who's shared what they have shared. The government doesn't want to share it, but people on the street who've had the experiences will tell you whatever you want as long as you don't laugh at them. So I appreciate all the advice that you people have given. It's in the government, I'm sure, is watching as well. You have the answers, and I appreciate you talking about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
Grant.
everyone.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks, Desta.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Good to see you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Jan.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Philip. Phil.